All right, everybody, new merch. We got some art done by artist Thomas C. Rogers. You may have seen some of his collabs with Devils of Dirt Hawking. He has also done some extensive work with Harley Davidson. There's no AI done here on our merch. Of course, our thumbnails are always AI, but check it out on sportingchancepod.com. We got pullovers, zip-ups, long sleeves, t-shirts, and of course, stickers.
And this podcast is brought to you by Mountain State Falconry Supply. Freshen up your gear or get ready for the micro season. Visit mountainstatefalconrysupply.com.
And don't forget to get the tightest braided equipment on the market at midnightfalconry.com.
If you haven't put a deposit down on your next hunting partner, now's the time. Contact Seth Roy at northmountaingoshawks.com for your next season's hunting partner.
Okay, everybody, welcome back to another exciting episode of the Sporting Chance podcast. We did things a little differently this time. We had very special guest Gary Brewer, but kind of spur of the moment, we decided to do an impromptu live event. We, at the North Carolina Falconry Meet, Gary Brewer was the guest speaker, and we were not going to let the opportunity to sit down and talk with him go. And we decided to do it with a small audience. And I think it went pretty well. What do you think, Casey?
I was nervous, to be honest. It was like spur of the moment. I was late. I was still in the field.
Of course.
We didn't
as
have
usual.
as usual. We didn't
Always
have
late.
we didn't have the chip for the recording device because we forgot to put it back in because it got moved. So then Aaron comes running out of like the auditorium where we were doing the live event and is like, this look on his face. And I'm like, oh no. And then luckily my camera, I have a camcorder that has like a crazy chip in it that holds all kinds of hours of footage. And we put that in there. And then we just sat down, adjusted some lights. It was like 20 people in that room.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was fun. This episode is a blast. It gets heated. I don't know if it was heated because when I was in the midst of it, I was just kind of like, it was a blur. I don't think it was heated, but me and Gary definitely got into a little bit of a debate back and forth.
And I want to talk about that. But before we get into that, I do want to say we mentioned it on the ad reads, but we just dropped new merch, and it was perfect timing because the merch is a red tail battling a squirrel on the back. And we wanted to do something a little different. We've all seen the shirt of like the meat shirt of a red tail flying after a squirrel. I've seen shirts of a red tail holding a dead squirrel, but we wanted to do like that, the battle that happens on the ground that we all get the privilege of seeing from time to time. And we were able to give the godfather of squirrel hawking one of these shirts. So that was pretty cool.
Yeah, it's definitely special.
Yeah. I hope he's rocking it. I got a feeling he is. And, I want to encourage you guys to go out and get one. That's how we fund this podcast, is through merch. We paid a real human artist, Thomas Rogers, good money, like some serious money, more money than Casey was comfortable spending to do the art. And it was expensive art. And we don't make a whole lot of money on the shirts. It's really, we're definitely not at the profit margin that a tax consultant or a business consultant would advise us to be at. But it's fun. I think it's super cool. I love doing it. So I encourage you guys, if you support the show, to go out and buy one of the shirts that we were able to gift Gary. But on the subject of Casey and him getting into a heated argument, you guys will hear it later. And I guess we probably shouldn't spoil it now. So I encourage you guys to check it out.
Yeah, definitely stay tuned. It's an excellent episode. The live audience laughter and cheering, and it made it 1,000 times better. Like,
I agree.
Because when I'm cracking jokes on the show, and Aaron as well, it's like we're not doing it to be funny. We're just doing it to keep, it's just our personalities. But when the audience starts laughing and clapping, it's like, oh, that one hit. Like, it was actually funny. I thought it was funny, but it was actually funny, I guess. Yeah. It was fun. It was good. It's a good time. It really was a good time.
It added a whole new element. And we're planning. Well, we're going to do it at the New Jersey Field Meet at the end of the month. I think that's what, February 26th and 27th. I think we're doing the live podcast at the 27th.
It's 27th and 28th, I thought.
Okay. We're doing the podcast Friday night, 9:30.
Friday night. Yeah, it's on the agenda for the meet. Like our whole, we're on the poster, 9:30, and first come, first serve. I have a feeling the room's going to get packed. Doing it live, we may add some other things in to make it more fun, possibly some giveaways. Maybe
there will be drinks flowing.
Some drinky drinks. Because that's the other thing I was going to say is when I'm doing it, when we have a guest on, and Gary, he's one of the more well-known people that I would really like to talk to. And that episode was fun, and I didn't even have one drink in me,
Right.
And it was still fun. So at this meet, we're going to cut loose. It's going to be a blast. The interview is going to be special, one that we've never done before in this way. But it's going to be right on par with the meet, right on par with the guest speaker, which is Teddy Moritz. And yeah, so if you're in the area, come by. It's free. It's just going to be fun. Don't miss it.
And I'm going to say that I'm a little worried about the technical part.
Yeah.
Because we have, I think it's no secret that we are a low tech podcast. Okay. So we do not have fancy recording equipment. We're doing okay. That's not really the point of our show. The point of our show is not superior audio quality. If that's your pet peeve, then check out John Munier. I just screwed his name up totally. It's not Munier and Munier combined. John Munier. Check out Falconry Chronicles. Show our boy John some love. But that's not what we're all about. We're about the content itself. So with that being said, we're trying to figure out how we can record and project the audio over speakers at the same time.
Yeah. I mean, we may not need to, because I know the room that they have us in, which I personally feel is not going to be big enough. I have a feeling, because when they do like workshops in there at that same time slot, I mean, the room is packed. There's people eating pizza. Like you can barely fit everybody in there when it's just like not a huge thing. Not that I think we're going to be huge, but I think I think there's going to be, standing room only. So, but the room is not large is my point. So I think if we're talking, I think it'll be fine. Or we put the table in the middle of the room and we put all the chairs around it so that our.
Oof. I'm like Buffalo Bill. I got to have my back to a wall at all times.
Tactical advantage.
Yeah. We'll see how it goes. It could be a shit show, but that might be fun too if it is.
Yeah, if the audio is unusable because of the way we try to do it, but then people in attendance have fun, then it is what it is. They had fun. That's it.
Yeah. But I also want to say that we're working the kinks out on this, but we are going to offer this to field meets in the future. We can talk about the details, but keep that in mind if you run a state club. If you want the Sporting Chance podcast to come do an interview live with someone, we will happily discuss that with you, because so far it has been fun. Everyone in attendance had a really good time. And if you check this episode out, I think you will agree. All right. What do you say, Casey?
Let's get into it. It's a good one. It's a long one, but it's a freaking good one.
This was very, we had hoped that Gary would sit down with us, but we didn't know for sure if he was going to, if he would have time. We figured he would say yes, but based on your reputation, of course. And so this was kind of last minute, and we've never done one of these before with an audience. So Casey's nervous. He's pooped like 3 or 4 times when that's
called projection.
So yeah, thank you everybody for joining us. And we're gonna do at the end. We want people to ask questions. So we'll get to that at a certain point. So thanks to everybody for joining us for the first ever Sporting Chance podcast with an audience.
Thank you. Thanks for being here, everybody.
With very special guests, Gary Brewer. Gary, thank you for coming. And we just want to go ahead and get this out of the way. We wanted to start this off by buttering you up with a gift.
All right.
So,
what's the catch?
You sitting here.
I'm just kidding.
You sitting here. That's the catch. So we just had this done, Sporting Chance podcast with a red-tailed hawk.
Awesome.
Battling a squirrel on the back. Most of you in here bought one of these. If you didn't, shame on you.
They'll be on the website.
But Gary gets one for free. Thank you, Gary.
Thank you.
For inspiring that shirt.
Thank you.
So for those of you out there who don't know, Gary is the guy who legitimized squirrel hawking. And everyone in the room knows that because we were here for the presentation. But what year was that, Gary, that you think that
it was ultimately legitimized? It was probably somewhere around 2003 in Kearney, Nebraska.
pretty recent?
2003?
About 2003. Now,
that's crazy.
I started squirrel hawking back in 1980 or 81, somewhere around in there.
When did you make the video?
Brad Woods made that video. Introduction to Squirrel Hawking, is that the one you're asking about? Oh, gosh, that was probably before the legitimization. It was after 95.
I watched it probably 1,000 times, Gary.
Yeah, it was after 1995.
Like legitimately 1,000 times.
The book came out in 1995, so it would have been somewhere around late 1990s or early 2000s.
Yeah, yeah. That video is...
What do you remember about that video?
I could probably sit and watch it and quote every word that Gary says as he's saying it.
Yeah. You remember that?
Yeah, oh yeah. The stick on the briars.
Yeah.
And I just remember you were so like my brother's very like more athletic than me, and we're all short in our family. And you reminded me of like the way that you're like jumping around, you're like with the chaps and like pulling it up and moving all fast. And like I'm like this is my kind of guy.
I used to be pretty fit.
Yeah, oh yeah. You can't really squirrel hawk that well if you can't run around a little bit. You gotta be able to run around, pull the vines, get in there.
It's strenuous.
Yeah, it's the best though.
Yesterday, this 5 foot. What are you? 5'2"?
I'm 5'7", dude.
This 5'2" guy. He looked just like Mario, Super Mario from the video game. He jumped over a fence. He jumped like straight up like that, like 4 feet tall, just boop over the fence.
I used to could do that. I also used an 8-foot bamboo pole.
Oh yeah, I remember the video. You used you did a crossing creeks.
Crossing creeks.
Yeah, everything. Going over briars.
Right.
Yeah, I remember.
Because you can always assure the creek you got to cross is the depth of your rubber boots plus 1 inch. Mm-hmm. So the bamboo pole came in real handy.
Yeah. We used I forgot that gentleman's name from Maryland, but we used a bamboo pole. And Paul. Shout out to Paul. And he did something pretty clever with it. He took it and he like scored it. So then when he's smacking trees with it, it makes like this loud that like blows your eardrums out. It's crazy.
I'm
like, that's really smart.
Unnerve a squirrel.
Yeah. Oh yeah.
You know. Yeah. That noise.
The calls to get them up.
And you can scrape it down the side of the tree and the bark will cause it to rattle.
And then the scraping down the tree is to simulate a predator climbing the tree to get them to...
It's just a noise. Okay. They're already surrounded by enemies.
Yes.
You know, and so the noise just further amplifies the fear. You're wanting him to do something stupid.
Exactly.
Do you have a vocal call that you do to scare squirrels?
No, not really. I'll, that kind of stuff. And just making noise.
Mm-hmm. My sponsor, Bob Pendergrass over there, his is, ha! Ha!
I think I do the same thing.
It works, though.
That'll work.
Yeah. So we, last night, we have heard your alien abduction method for manning red-tailed hawks. And I've heard you discuss that twice, and I certainly don't mind the refresher that I got last night. But our hope was to talk to you about some things that you haven't got the opportunity to really discuss.
Okay.
Let's kick things off with dogs. We're dog men.
Me too.
I want to hear you expand upon squirrel hawking dogs.
Oh, yeah. Well, a squirrel hawking dog is a luxury, not a necessity. But damn, what a luxury. because where the real value of a squirrel hawking dog is, A, to keep the squirrel from coming to the ground, and if it does, run it back up the next tree, not the one it's running for. The second is if the bird misses a squirrel, bails out and it misses it, the dog will show you exactly where it went. Without the dog, you'll run to where you last saw the squirrel and you'll see 100 different places it may have went. But with the dog, they'll tell you exactly where it went, and you have a better chance of getting the chase restarted. So, a dog definitely improves the average, but it's not a necessity. You can do it without a dog, but once you've ever had a well-trained dog that worked with the birds really well, it's pretty hard not to have one ever. So I lost my dog a few years ago. He was the 16 best years of falconry I ever had. I'm still grieving. And that's the way it is. If you get a dog, the key thing with squirrel dogs, the three most important things in training a squirrel dog is obedience, obedience, and obedience. Everything else the dog already has and will learn on the job. But you've got to be able to control the dog, which means they've got to be really hard trained in obedience, solid. Because once the action begins, they kind of go deaf. They're committed, and it's hard to get them to listen. So you do that training before you go into the field. Another aspect of the dog training is that you've got to create a ring of respect around the bird. And the dog is never allowed to cross that ring of respect. I like about a 4 foot, 8 foot diameter, but 4 foot. The dog is not allowed to go any closer than 4 foot of the bird when the bird's on the ground. And over time, a dog and bird team will get so comfortable with each other that the bird would tolerate the dog coming up and licking her from her crotch to her beak and just be mildly annoyed. But you don't want to let that happen because the next bird may not be so tolerant. And once you've allowed a dog to come in and get close to the bird, it's hard to break that.
The next bird.
It's a lot easier to maintain it.
The next bird will just teach the lesson that the other bird didn't teach.
Yeah. Educate the dog. They're good teachers.
Are you using an e-collar during that training process?
Never.
No?
The only training tool that I use is a rod and tail. Squirrel tail on a piece of paracord that's tied onto the end of a fishing rod, a cheap fishing rod.
For trailing purposes and tracking and scent?
Well, they chase it.
Oh, they chase it. Okay.
Yeah. When I bring home a puppy, I start the training at 6 weeks old.
Okay.
Contrary to what I've read in a lot of other dog training books where they say 6 months to a year.
Yeah, but we do 8. Dachshunds are like, I got Ginger at 8 weeks. She was great. 8.
Right.
Earlier
It should start right away.
Yeah, get in there.
I also encourage that the dog live with the family. Because if you got the dog in the backyard or in a kennel or something, then they're only being trained during a few minutes a day. But when they live in the family unit, they're constantly 24/7 in training.
Yeah.
And a big mistake people make is when they say something like sit and stay. Okay, and anybody can teach in 5 minutes, anybody can teach a dog to sit and stay. The difference comes when you start to put distance between you and the dog. The further away you get from the dog, the more anxious they get. And so sometimes the dog will break and start moving forward, and you turn around and you tell them to stop and you tell them to sit and stay. But that's not the proper way to handle that. You go back and you take them right back to where you started and tell them to sit and stay. Otherwise, you're teaching them to sneak when you got your back turned. So, and if something happens to that dog, you don't have to file a report with the state and federal government. So the bird is paramount. Her safety is the most important thing in this event. You got 2 natural predators out there working together. So you've got to be on your toes. Using a dog it makes things a lot easier in many ways, but it also requires, I used to joke around and say, I just give them a ride. I'm just a chauffeur, and then I get out there and I turn them loose, and they could go out there and do it on their own.
I think it's the goal of every falconer.
But the thing about the dog is that the dog is always going to follow its nose. So it's only going to be become interested in things that are upwind. So the job of the handler is if he sees something that he wants checked out that's downwind, then he calls the dog over and he points in there and tells him to check it out. And if he sticks his head in there and backs out, I always put him in on the downwind side. If he sticks his head in there and he comes right back out and takes off running, there's nothing in there.
Right. Yeah.
But if he sticks his head in there and then he starts burrowing in there, then there's something in there.
Smoke bomb.
And he'll get them out. That's another thing. I'm glad you brought that up.
Oh, yeah.
I recommend that a squirrel dog be small. You know, I went out with a guy up in Illinois one time that had a golden retriever that weighed about 95 pounds. And, you know, he was trying to use the family dog. You know, he trying to make that one dog all purpose. Right. He had a wife that weighed probably 90 pounds and had her on the end of a long check cord. And that dog drug her all over the field. He had a shock collar on the dog. And every time the dog kind of got unruly, he'd zap that dog. I don't use a shock collar, but what I noticed that people, I really think you should have a prescription to use a shock collar because most people misuse a shock collar. It's not a way to punish the dog. It's a way to cause discomfort in the dog at the point of an action you don't want to occur. Yeah. You know, like de-skunking or de-snaking a dog. You don't shock them after they've done it. No. You have to shock them at the time that they commit the action so that they can associate the discomfort with the act and not with the trainer. This guy, this guy was hammering that dog out of anger. So that's why I think most people.
Well, you were there. You didn't want to look bad in front of you. So I think he was probably a little keyed up.
No, I could tell this was his standard procedure. Okay. He kept telling me the whole time this dog was professionally trained.
Oh, yeah.
And I didn't see any of that. Right. Yeah. His sponsor wasn't able to make it to the meet. And he called me and asked me if I'd go out with the guy and give him some advice. And my advice to him was get another dog, a small dog.
So we didn't even discuss this. What dogs are you using? What do you like?
I like the dog that I had that I loved so much that was really good. He was a legend. I mean, he was in magazines and everything else. I mean, he was just an amazing dog. But I put a lot of work into him. You know, every dog out there is a diamond in the rough. And the trainer is going to be the one. They're not born being a good hunting dog. They have to be made into a good hunting dog, which means that, you know, I can't afford to have somebody else train my dogs. So I train them myself, and I go that extra mile. I
can't really picture you paying another person to train one of your animals for you. You don't strike me as that kind of person.
One other thing I need to get in here before I forget it. The selection of the dog. We kind of touched on that. Yeah. What breed of dog? I used a Jack Russell Terrier, slick coat. But, you know, people use Feist. They use the mini dachshunds. Teddy Moritz, she's famous in this country for breeding the mini dachshunds. A lot of people like them. I prefer the male dog. Okay. And but the key factor in a dog, you know, all dogs are hunting dogs. They're all predators. They're canine predators. They're little miniature wolves. You just got to harness that and apply it to what your needs. And that means in the training process that I use a lot of games that teaches them things. Like a terrier. Terriers are more visually oriented than they are nose oriented, but you can teach them to be nose oriented. And I want them to be both, but I really want that nose. I want them to use that nose. So I have a game that I play with them called Where's It At? Where, the training process, it begins, you got the rod with the tail. The tail is tied to the end of and it's a real squirrel tail, a dried squirrel tail from a previous kill. I save all my tails for that reason. The squirrel tail is perfect because it's fatter on one end and then it tapers down to the other end. All the hairs go in one direction. So it's easy when the dog grabs it and he doesn't want to give it up, you can slide it through his teeth. Okay. The tail has got the scent. It's not a fake. I've tried using fake scents and they work, but I'm not convinced that it's the same scent that they're going to scent in the wild. So the squirrel tail is good for that. Then as a puppy, when you bring it home, you get that squirrel tail out there and you play it. They're going to want to chase it. When they get a whiff of it, they're going to want to chase it. You move it around, and you got to keep it just in front of them so they just think they can get it. Right. And they will literally, a good dog prospect will literally run itself to death on that tail. You have to be the one to call it and say, okay, that's enough. They will become, and what you're looking for, and it's just playtime. Chase the tail. You got to let them catch it every now and then. Right. And when they do catch it, you make it struggle, to get them all excited. Then you tell them to sit. And then you pop them on the underside of their chin and tell them to give. If they don't give, then you stick your thumb in pry their teeth apart and slide it out. After a while, they'll understand we don't go forward until I give it up. Yeah. And so you'll notice, and you can't keep that thing where they know where it is.
Oh, yeah.
They'll destroy the house.
That's a bad idea, yeah.
Trying to get to it, so you keep it in a place that they're not aware of where it is. Usually better to keep it up off the ground in a cabinet somewhere where they can't get a whiff of it. And what you're looking for to begin the training is they become obsessed with that tail. I do a training session in the early part of the day, and then I do a training session in the late part of the day. 15 or 20 minutes is all it takes every day, twice a day. But when they start showing that obsession, where you call the dog and you tell them to sit, and then you go where the tail is and you get it out, and they see you with that tail, they just go absolutely berserk. Then you take them out. When you see that kind of behavior where they're just obsessed, the training can begin. And I say that's my only training tool because they're so obsessed with that tail. The object is to teach them that they have to exhibit certain kinds of behavior to get the tail, to get to chase it and catch it. So sitting, staying, all that kind of stuff. You teach them to sit and you teach them to stay, and then you start to lower that tail down in front of them. And they're watching that tail come down, and they'll even start to tremble. They'll even start to shake, and they'll want to break. But if they break, you pick it up. You put them back in the spot that they were again. You firmly tell them, you stay there. And then you do it again until they'll allow you to lay it on the floor right in front of them. The release command is okay. And then you start to chase. You let them chase it for a little while, and then you let them catch it. When a dog gets really good at it, it's a challenge to keep them from catching it. I mean, they'll even do a 360 backflip. You can run it forward and then bring it back over them.
That's just Jack Russell's. Dachshund. Yeah. I can tell you Dachshund.
Oh, Dachshund will do that. Yeah, but I don't know. Some of them I've seen might try.
They might try.
But at any rate, I like to train them on the sit and stay to where I could sit them and stay them in the front yard and then go around to the backyard and wait a little bit of time. And then they're not allowed to come find me until I scream, okay, then they can come. Okay, when they'll sit and stay that firm, then we can go to the next steps, which is where's it at? The where's it at game is a squirrel tail that's not on the rod. Okay, it's a free tail. So you sit them and you stay them, and then you go around out of sight. You start out just putting it out there obvious.
Are you dragging it, or are you just placing it?
Just throwing it out.
So you want like an air scenting kind of thing?
Yeah, because the air, it's best to do this when there's just a slight breeze, and you'll be able to see the scent because they'll run into it, and it's like hitting a wall. But early on with a puppy, they often will go the wrong way. But they'll figure that out and they'll turn around and come back. So if it's sitting out there obvious, you want it to be easy so that they can learn what the game's about.
Right.
The game is when you say, "Where's it at?" That means go find the tail. The tail's hidden out here somewhere. And you keep making it a little more difficult, a little more difficult, a little more difficult until you can even put it under a piece of plywood or something where they know it's here somewhere, but it's under that plywood. And you want them to start digging at the edge of the plywood. Graduation day is when you put it in a bush up off the ground about 3 foot. That's tough because the scent is not coming from the ground. It's coming from above. So they have to learn how to follow that scent and then look up. And when they do find the tail in every stage of the game, when they do find the tail, they're going to grab it with their mouth. And you don't want them running off with it and tearing it up. You want them to bring it to you. So as soon as they put their mouth on it, you drop down and start going, "Come here, buddy. Come here, bring it here. Bring it here, bring it here." See, that's another command. Bring it here. Because some of these days, the dog is going to get to the squirrel before the bird does. And you don't want the dog picking up the squirrel and running off with it. So he needs to know what "bring it here" means. And of course, in the course of bringing it to you, he's liable to get a bird right on his nose.
Yes.
And that'll learn him. But at any rate, the reward for every accomplishment of every stage of this is to get to chase the tail. I tell people I could teach a dog to play Mozart on the piano. If they thought by doing so they would get to chase that tail. The bond is that strong.
So now are you allowing...
I don't use treats.
Yeah, I don't like the treat thing either.
I don't use treats.
You use treats, Aaron?
No.
Aaron, you seem like a treat kind of guy.
No.
I tap
Got a bunch of little sweets in your pocket for your dogs?
I tap into one of the two most powerful instincts that the dog has, and that is seek and destroy. When it comes to a terrier or a mini dog, when their eyes are open, they're looking for seek and destroy. Then that's their strongest instinct, and that's what I use to get them to do what I want them to do.
So now when discipline is necessary, are you running them down?
No. People make a mistake if the dog is out there and you're calling the dog.
Yeah. He's got the tail in his mouth. He runs across the yard. You're calling. You're saying, "Come here, bring it here," and he doesn't bring it here. At what point do you go over there?
He's got it in his mouth.
Yeah.
And, especially if you've allowed the dog to live within the family, then there's a strong bond that develops between you and the dog. And that dropping down on your knees and clapping your hands and telling him, "Bring it here, bring it here, bring it here." I've not had a dog just run off and the last thing you want to do is chase him down, because that's another whole game that you don't want to teach him. If a dog is out there and it's not coming when you call it, if this dog has been properly bonded with you, the proper way to get the dog to return is to turn and walk away. I had Jack Russell Terriers are bad about going down holes. They're bred for that. That's what they are.
You mean bad? You mean good? Like they go down the holes?
Well, it depends on what's down in the hole.
I guess in your neck of the woods, yeah, that would make sense.
It'd be possums or coons. I don't want them in the hole. They'll get down in that hole and they'll start barking. And if you're at the top of the hole going, "Trapper, trapper, come out here, come out here," what you're doing is you're reassuring them that you're there and they ain't coming out. So, so you leave the hole, get away and kind of sit down and get quiet. And after a while, they'll wonder and they'll come out of the hole looking for you. Once you get them to the top of the hole, then you can call them back to you.
Right.
And then, you want to avoid that hole on your way back. You know, you know where the hole is, and they'll go right back down in it if they get a scent.
I mean, I don't know. If I had a Jack Russell and it was barking at a possum or a coon in a hole,
He would take a break from hawking to kill a raccoon.
I have killed a couple of raccoons. Actually, he killed a raccoon one time. It got up in a hollow log, and they were up in there together, and the log was semi-rotten. So I had to start chipping it away to get in there, and he was up in there, and he had the raccoon by the throat. And the raccoon didn't have enough room to maneuver in there to retaliate. So I wound up opening up a hole that I could reach up in there and grab him by the tail. That's what that stump tail is for. That's why they have that tail. It's a handle. If they're in a hole or up in a hollow log, you reach up in there and you grab that tail as a handle and pull them out. So when I pulled him out, he had the raccoon by the throat. And so when I pulled him out of the log, immediately I put my knee on the chest of that raccoon and just put all my weight on it. You know, and he was shaking that raccoon with his,
good dog.
And I couldn't let the raccoon go. You know, so I had to go ahead and put it down. I didn't really want a raccoon. Bragging rights would be about all it would be good for. Yeah. Possums, I'd really rather not
they're just like
possums.
so like it's
so
just
easy.
Yeah, it's just like
they're so soft.
Meat, and the meat is so greasy and oily. I don't want my dog.
They're just like they're not a challenging species to pursue. Really,
you've eaten possum?
I have never eaten possum. I've never eaten raccoon. I wouldn't be opposed to trying it.
Me and Richard, this is Rich right here. We're from West Virginia, and those are staples in our diets.
Well, there's some people where I live that eat possum too. Mm-hmm. Not very many, you know, but
it's real common in West Virginia.
They used to catch the possums, right, and then put them in a cage and force feed them
feed them bread, feed them Wonder Bread.
Yeah.
Get nice and sweet.
Yeah, I'll pass on that.
I bet in a crock
don't
pot
knock it till you try it.
Good, yeah, maybe well done.
Next year at the field meet, we'll have the Sporting Chance Possum Cook-Off, hosted by me and Rich. All right.
But anyway, the dog, again, I stress, you want the dog to be as closely sized to your quarry because, you know, the size of the dog is going to limit how far the dog can pursue the quarry. You know, if you have a dog like a Jack Russell or a mini Doc, you know, they can pretty much anywhere a rabbit or a squirrel can go, they can follow. Whereas if you got a big dog, you know, a 25, 30-pound dog, they can't chase them any further than you can.
Yeah. Also getting there, couple of the theories we talk about on the show is like, we agree that the dog should be the same size, similar size. And also,
as close as possible.
Correct. And also it helps because if you have like a lurcher with you, that dog could get to the squirrel before your bird is coming out of the tree, and then it kind of messes up the whole thing. Yeah, we knew that was going to happen.
Yeah, Jack Russell can do the same thing. In fact, when that video you were talking about, Brad Woods made, Introduction to Squirrel Hawking.
Yes.
Well, no, this was a different video he made. We put together one called Squirrel Hawking with my friends.
I think I saw that one too.
I've invited a lot of different people flying, you know, male red tails,
so I was just going to say
female red tails, Harris hawks.
Yeah, I remember that video.
You know, stuff like men, women, you know, just a variety of squirrel hawkers and their tools. And in that course of making that video, on my part of it, you know, Trapper caught 2 of the squirrels that we chased, and we did.
How do you feel about that when the dog catches the squirrel?
You know, look, if the dog catches the squirrel before the bird does, that's fair. That's fair.
Do you count it? Do you keep track of how much you catch?
Yeah, it's a team effort.
Yeah.
You know, I count that as a kill. I don't want the dog to catch it. But in the event that he does catch, I want the bird to catch it. Mm-hmm. But if the dog catches the squirrel before the bird gets to it, that's fair in my book. You know, but The important thing is that when the bird comes into the picture, the dog needs to back off in honor, not go in. So it requires a lot of, you got to be, as the handler, you just double complicated the whole affair by adding another predator to the team. Well, like I said, you don't have to file a report with the state and the federal government if something happens to that dog. But if something happens to that dog, you're going to have to report what happened with the bird.
You're right.
So the bird comes first, and the dog must learn. Now, I used a long time ago. I used Brittany's, and they're bird dogs. So of course they're interested in the bird. And now this is not going to sound good, but I had one
Welcome
dog.
to the Sporting Chance podcast.
It doesn't sound very good.
Well, to some people, to a dog trainer, a hunting dog trainer, it will make sense.
Have you noticed every falconer is a dog? There's the prevalence of dog trainers in falconry.
I think that they're the minority.
It seems to me like everybody's a dog trainer. How many dog trainers we got in the house? Yeah.
Well, some people, okay, let me say this about that. Some people, like my wife, thinks that if the dog will stand on his hind legs and take a piece of chicken out of your hand, that's trained. But that's training a dog. That's not training a dog.
I had a pug one time that I could put a piece of cheese in the wrinkle on his nose. How would you rate that?
No, that's training. Totally useless. Totally useless training, but very entertaining.
I think pugs are pretty useless to begin with.
Thank you.
What are pugs even good for?
My sister, I just
going
have
into
to warn you,
cardiac
my
arrest.
sister has 9 pugs in her house.
9 pugs.
In her house. A small house.
Does she have like defibrillators on every wall in the house?
Actually, my sister is an amazing woman. She's older than I am, and those pugs are really well behaved. When you talk to her on the phone, she's constantly going, Roscoe, get out of there. You get away from there.
I can see it looking back.
Those are her children. Those are her children. But anyway, pugs, I wouldn't recommend for squirrel hawking.
What would you recommend them for?
Huh?
What would you recommend them for?
Lap dog.
Oh, okay. All right.
They're good at that.
Yeah. I guess that makes sense. All right.
But at any rate, training, like I said, is not training a dog to sit up for a tidbit. That's not training. And when you're out there in the field, you want to train this dog where you have control over the dog. Because once they break, which also requires that you be attentive. You're always watching that dog, because if they stop and their ears are perked up and their nose is wrinkled and they're staring into something in the future, there's something they think they might see out there. And if you don't want them going that way, if you can catch them before they break, they can hear. But once they break, they become deaf. So that requires that the handler always be aware of the dog and what their body language is. The hawk will pretty well take care of itself, but the dog is the wild card in the team, So I love working with the dogs and the birds together. But I was going to tell you about that Brittany. She was really high strung and was very interested in the birds. And what I wound up having to do with her, I guess this kind of falls into the category of shot collar, but it's not a shot collar. I'd call her over, and then I'd grab her by the collar and just yank her up there, and the bird would foot her on the nose. And then they don't bind to them.
Yeah, they smack them basically.
They just smack them, spur them
Yeah.
on the nose, and that's good for the dog. If it's a dog that's real high strung, that'll teach them.
When you say high strung, like too interested in the bird, like getting a little.
Some dogs are wired a little bit different than other dogs. Some dogs have a real strong will of their own. And of course, their instinct, seek and destroy, is the most powerful instinct they have. And some dogs are a little more cooperative. Some dogs are a little more selfish and independent. And so those dogs are harder to deal with. And that's, that can all be avoided if you start the training early, like we talked about beginning, and bonding to the dog. The dogs, a lot of people won't want to do this, but the dog sleeps with me, and they're part of the family. Another thing people make the mistake of when they get a dog to sit and stay, say like at 2:00 in the morning when they wake you up and they need to go outside and take a dump or something, you go to the front door and I always tell them to sit and stay. And then I open the door and release them. The release word is okay. You can have your own release word, but mine is okay. And then they run out there. Well, you do that multiple times. You got to be careful with the dog not to establish a pattern, because then they start going into autopilot and they're not listening. The object of a hunting dog is you want them to be listening, not operating in autopilot. So if you go, sit, stay, and then open the door and go, okay, and you do that every time.
They're going to freeze and then go.
They're going to sit, stay, and then go as soon as the door opens.
And then you just shut the door a little quicker
when they do that, they're not listening.
Yeah.
So, and the only way you can control a dog is if they are listening. That applies to hawks too. You don't want to set up any patterns that might create behavior that you don't want. And red tails are pattern oriented. They see something, they see a series of events that leads to a positive or negative outcome. They'll memorize that. And so once they got that sequence of events that lead to an outcome, they're not patient. So if they recognize the sequence of events unfolding, step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, they see step 1, step 2. What's the point of waiting around for step 3?
Yeah, you better have your glove ready after it's done eating the trade-off piece. So that's an example of that.
When you go to the door, going to pee is an example. I always vary it up. How long they have to sit there with the door standing open before they're allowed to go out. And
that's fun at 2:00 in the morning.
Yeah, it's hard. Can I tell a short story?
Of course.
I was in Amarillo in a motel. I didn't know that at night, out there in the parking lot, in the little grassy areas around the parking lot, there'd be rabbits sitting out there at night. Trapper woke me up at about 3:00 in the morning. It was cold. It was well diggers cold outside. But I was sleeping so hard. So I just figured this would take just a minute. So I was half dressed. And I went out to let him take a leak in a dump. And, he'll take a leak anywhere, but he's real particular about where he'll take a dump. And he won't do it on the leash.
Okay, he is too, actually.
Yeah.
So I'm freezing, I'm freezing. And he's out there, he's trying to find a place to take a crap. And so I just figured I got to get out of this cold. I unclipped him. Next door to the motel was a mobile home park. Okay. He was out there looking for a place to take a crap, and he jumped a rabbit. And it ran straight over there up under a mobile home. And, of course, with him right on his butt. And he took it back there. I'm assuming it was underneath this guy's master bedroom. He cornered that rabbit up in the back corner of that mobile home. It's 3:00 in the morning. I'm freezing and half dressed. So I'm over there on my hands and knees under this mobile home going, Trapper, get up here. And I hear the door open. And so I back out and I look up there, and this guy looks like Mr. Clean. No hair, no neck, big guy.
You're looking at me right here.
He didn't have a beard.
Woke me up. I wasn't happy.
He looked like he just got out of a pen.
Yeah.
He was all tattooed up and everything. And he goes, "What the hell is going on out here?" I said, "Sir, I'm very sorry. I'm staying at the motel next door, and my dog, I was taking him out to, and he good rabbit, and he's under. I don't care, but get that damn thing out from under my house. So I crawled under there in the dark to where he was at, and I grabbed him and drug him back out. But that's the kind of things that can happen,
Did you get the rabbit?
Things that no, I just wanted to get out of there with my life.
He killed the rabbit, I'm assuming, right?
Huh?
He killed the rabbit, I'm assuming?
No, he didn't kill it. He had it cornered and was barking at it.
Like Jack Russell's baying a rabbit?
Yeah. And so what I'm saying is when you take on the responsibility of adding a dog to the team, it adds another whole layer of attention that you have to be on top of it.
Correct.
I don't recommend a new falconer take on a dog. You learn how to manage the bird first. When you feel like you're pretty good at that, then you can add a dog. I think adding a dog early on is a little much.
I want to ask you a question that I get asked all the time. How do you acclimate the birds and dogs?
Good question.
Thank you.
You don't just throw them together. Once you got the dog really well obedience trained, when we get to the creance training part of it, the first couple of sessions on the creance, you go out to the one side of the creance perch and you sit the dog and tell it to stay. And then you call the bird to you walk it back, call it to you, walk it back, call it to you, walk it back. And the dog does nothing but sit there until the bird is coming out there about 20 foot or so. Then you call the bird to the glove, and once you get control of his feet, then you go, okay. And the dog will rip out there, run around you, and then you tell him another command is, get in your place. Get in your place. They will learn. You walk over there and you point where you want him to sit, and you say, get in your place, and they'll run over there and sit down. Okay? After you've trained several birds this way, you can ingest, you could say he could train that bird himself. He knows this routine. And the dogs understand, they love this so much that they know the routine. They know they can't do anything but just sit there, and you got to continually be reinforcing. You can't just leave them. You got to continually reinforce them until they become a seasoned dog. Okay, as the creance training continues, their weight's coming down. They're learning the routine. The dog's now allowed to run out there, run around you. The bird sees them, and then they put the dog back in his place, and keep on going. Well, as the weight is coming down and the training progresses, you're going to reach this place I call surrender weight. Where people go, well, how do you know when they've reached surrender weight? All I can say is you'll know it, because the bird will be different. The bird will be eager to get this training thing going, because they know what to expect. Because once you've taken them out on the creance a few times, they understand when you come out there what's going to take place. Again, a series of actions that lead to a positive outcome, a potential payday. Okay, all right. So when they hit that surrender weight, and I recommend this not just with a dog, but with people, with everything. Back when I first got into falconry, the deal was you didn't want to scare the bird. You sit in a quiet room with the bird on your fist for hours waiting for them to, take something off of the glove, and, progress ain't going to start until that happens. And your kid comes in there and opens the door and the bird baits, you get all mad.
Yep.
Can't y'all just stay quiet for just a little while, please? Yeah. That's really not the right approach. These birds should be exposed to everything they're going to have to put up with, because when they get to that surrender weight, they're going to write you a blank check. And everything they've had to put up with up to that point is going to be in that check. Kids are great. I tell people, if you don't have any kids, borrow or rent some, because they're perfect to condition a bird to people, because they can't be still. They can't be quiet. So they're on the sideline. They're not allowed to charge in there unless you tell them they can come up and look close and then go back and stand on the sideline. Kids love that thing. They love animals. It's not hard to get kids to come watch. Because I noticed when my kids got growed up and moved out of the house, and we had no kids in the house. We've always lived out in the country. We don't live in a neighborhood. So I started winding up with birds that loved only me, And it's really, really hard to condition a bird that has passed the surrender weight and hadn't had to put up with people. The object is everything you want these birds to tolerate, you want to pile it in there before they hit that surrender weight. Because when they hit that surrender weight, it's all accepted, carte blanche. And kids are better than adults because adults tend to stand around and watch. You want them wiggling and squirming, wrestling with each other on the sideline. Because as that bird's weight's coming down, they may be concerned about those little fidgets over there, but if they want the tidbit, they're going to come anyway. And after they do it a couple of times and get away with it, then it's okay. Also notice that if you can get a bird to tolerate 3 people, they'll tolerate any number of people. So it's really crucial. Falconry, your best hunts are always the ones just you and the animals. Those are the best. But it's also something that can be shared and is fun to share. It's a great way to raise kids because it's kid-friendly. They don't have to be still or quiet. In fact, they can run with a stick in their hand, and not get in trouble. They can get dirty, muddy, and so kids are awesome for falconry. And I've never seen falconry as a way to get away from my kids, or their friends. I was the cool dad, of course, because kids love animals. So I'd go to the woods at least with my kids, but a lot of times with their friends as well. So kids should be a part of your falconry practice. If they're not yours, they're somebody else's. Just share it with the children. They have a very positive effect on your practice. The bird learns to tolerate, and put up with, and even learns that it's beneficial.
You can tell Gary's not a goshawker.
Yeah. Yes, I'm not. And I pray to God I never am. No offense. But I like for things to go well.
Because kids and goshawks don't go together. Yeah,
I like to go out there and put the bird on the scales, and based on the weather and the weight, I could kind of predict how things are going to go, and then usually they go just according to plan. Whereas I got a close friend. He's one of them accipiter people. He always has been. He got into falconry the same year I did, but back then we didn't have internet or any of that kind of stuff, so it took us a year to find each other. But he's always had a leaning towards feathered quarry. So he flies the accipiters, sharpies, coots, goshawks. If he's going to fly a hairhawk, it's going to be a tiercel because he wants that option to go both ways, But myself, he showed up on my front porch one day with a downy. I helped him find the nest. It was out in the Big Bend area of West Texas, which is a 12-hour drive from my house. I'll tell you that story if you want. Yeah. So it was me and him and another guy. I speak sign language, so I've sponsored 2 deaf guys. Oh, and I'm going to tell you, that is an accomplishment for a deaf man to fly a bird because he can't hear the bells. Yeah. One day, on my hairhawks, I used to just run one bell, because they're so dependable. They don't wander off. They come back looking for you, And so I only ran one bell on them so I could find them if they were on the ground underneath a bush with something. And one day I went to a place to hunt, and I noticed when I got out, they could always tell. They're listening too. They hear the truck door slam, no reaction. They hear you walking around, no reaction. You drop that tailgate, boom, they're kicking the door. They know. There was no noise of a bell. When I opened up the door, the bell was laying in the bottom of the box. And I thought, oh, crap. I thought, well, Matthew does this all the time. So I went ahead and went with it, and I hunted the whole time walking backwards because I couldn't take my eyes off the bird. You turn around, it moves. But Matthew told me, the deaf guy, he said when a bird goes through the woods, it creates a wake like a boat in the water. And he's tuned in to the wake. He never, as long as that guy was a falconer, which was about probably 15 years, he left one bird out overnight and got it back the next day. Now that is pretty impressive, right?
So when he says it's a wave, like the animals or stuff?
Right. Everything reacts. There's shadows, there's, all the wildlife, the birds, everything reacts. We don't pay any attention to that because we got these things, these ears. But that's not the story I was going to tell you. I told you that story to tell you he was with us. When we went out West Texas with my friend, I was just out there for the adventure. I don't give a crap about no Cooper's Hawk nest, but I enjoyed being with these guys and the adventure, the adventure of going out there and trying to find a nest. Well, we drove out to West Texas. There was a big rest area out there that's had a sign that says no parking more than 24 hours. So we had to move the truck every day. We're going to be there a week. It's all closed land out there. I think I got to be careful about what I'm fixing to say. It's all closed land out there. It's all fenced, is what I'm trying to say. Okay, so you're driving around looking from the truck to see if there's any group of trees or water or whatever that you think might be a good place to look. So the three of us, we would all synchronize our watches. We didn't have cell phones. We'd all synchronize our watches, and there would be a driver, and there'd be the guy, Kevin, the guy that was looking for a bird nest, and then there's the other two of us. And so we'd synchronize our watches, and the deal was they'd hop the fence and disappear, and then you'd go away for 2 hours. And back then, we didn't have GPS, so you had to find a landmark, or you'd lose them. 2 hours, you'd come back. If within 5 minutes nobody stood up in the brush, you left and come back in exactly 1 more hour. When they stood up, they got in. The next time, the other guy gets to go with the scouting trip. For 5 days, we did this without finding any nests. We found one old nest that was not being used, and that was it. So Saturday morning, we're packing up to leave, and I needed to take a leak. Behind the rest area on the other side of the fence was a brook, like a creek. There's a shallow creek that was running through there. So I told Kevin, I said, man, I need to go take a leak. And he goes, yeah, me too. Matthew goes, well, you go in. And I gave him the sign language for piss. That's how you do it? That's a P, and you pop your nose with the P. And that means piss. And he goes, me too. So we climbed over the fence. We go down there to the little river thing, and we're all standing there pissing in the river. And off to our right, we hear cat, 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 cat. The whole week, there was a nest 100 feet from where we were parked. So
oh my gosh.
We went down there and found the tree. That's the biggest tree in all of West Texas, I'm pretty sure. I got a picture of it if you don't believe me. Kevin looked like he was about 1/4 inch tall standing out there at the bottom of this tree. Well, I was the best tree climber of the group. So I climbed up there, and there were 2 eggs in the nest. We were too early. And this is 12 hours away from home, okay? So I had burned up a vacation week to go out there. So I couldn't come back. Matthew couldn't come back. He had a job. So Kevin was going to have to come back on his own. So we went into town and we bought some flashing metal. And we went out there and we collared the tree. Because if you climb a tree to a nest and a raccoon smells your scent, they'll climb the tree and follow your scent right to the nest, and they'll eat the eggs. So we collared the tree. Kevin was going to have to go back on 4th of July weekend. Then he shows up on my porch with a basket with 2 downies in it, and one for him and one for me, because he was convinced I really wanted to fly Cooper's Hawk and just didn't know it. And so I had it. I couldn't do, it was it. I had it. I did a really good job with that Cooper's Hawk. But and I got called. I was an insurance adjuster at the time. And there was a disaster in California in the Bay Area. And I had to smuggle this bird onto the airplane. This was before 9/11, right? You wouldn't get away with this today. And back in them days, you had to have a letter of permission from every state, from Texas to exit and re-enter, from New Mexico to pass through their state, from Arizona to pass through their state, and California to enter and exit. I was going to be there more than 30 days, so I had to get a California license, which meant that I had to go prepared to pass an inspection, living in an upstairs apartment that I rented. What I used, and this might be some valuable information for you, especially for an accipiter guy, what I used for a muse is a 3-man dome tent. And I put together a bow perch out of PVC, but didn't glue it together. And I took me a couple of hard frozen turkey necks, and I froze them, wrapped them in about 6 layers of aluminum foil. And I put all that in the bag. I took the Cooper's Hawk and I made me a tube out of poster board, and I slid the Cooper's Hawk up into the tube, and then I took a woman's hose and I pulled it down over, and on the other end I tied a knot in it, and I laid it in there between those frozen turkey necks. I put on a really good suit, 3-piece suit, the cowboy hat, the heap of trouble glasses on, the mirror sunglasses. Back then, Dallas-Fort Worth Airport didn't exist. It was Dallas Love Field. So the security was not like it is now. It was still pretty good. So I get up to the security part where you run everything through the vacuum. Well, I had all these letters from I had to get letters from all the states on letterhead giving me permission to go through their state. Now, it would have been easier to transport a bazooka than it was to transport a bird of prey. So I get to the thing, and the girl says, put the bag on the belt. And there was a cop's over against the wall, leaned up against the wall with his foot up. This was his off-duty job because cops don't make a lot of money. And I said to her, well, I don't mind running the bag through the X-ray, but I got a bird in this bag I'd really rather not expose to X-ray. They're going to see it anyway. So this is where I gotta initiate the plan. Well, when I said that, the cop put his foot down and started listening. And she said, "You got a bird in that bag?" And I pulled it out and I pointed it to him, and that Cooper's face with that nobody's home look, in his eyes. And the cop came over there and he said, "Can I see that?" And I showed it to him. And he says, "Ain't that illegal?" I said, "Yes, sir, it's a felony if you don't have the right paperwork." And he goes, "And I'm assuming you have the right paperwork?" I pulled out that notebook. It was all fixed up really nice with sheet protectors and, all these state seals, on paperwork. And it's every one of them said, "The bearer of this permit is allowed to transport female Cooper's Hawk, band number, blah, blah, blah." It didn't say anything about on the airplane. Okay. But, back then we had the advantage that nobody knew anything about falconry or falconry laws.
They still don't. I don't.
Right. So he's looking at all these state seals, and he says to me, "You ever done this before?" And I took my glasses off and I looked him right in the eye. I said, "I do this all the time." And he shrugged his shoulders and said, "Okay, I guess so." Of course, coming back was a different thing later on at LAX. I got to the security part, and there was this little old gal that was running the thing, and I pulled the same scam. I really would rather not expose this bird to X-rays. I'll run the rest of it through. And she goes, "You got a bird in that bag?" And it was all going according to plan. And then I said, "Yes, ma'am." And I pulled it out and I showed it to her, and she started on about her parrot. So while she's talking about her parrot, I set the bag on the belt and it's going through the thing. I walk around on the other side, and when she took a breath, I picked up "It's been really nice talking to you, ma'am." And I got on the plane. While I was on the plane, this Cooper's Hawk is in this bag. It was an athletic bag. Remember the old kind that had the curved top on it, the zipper? So she's in this bag in my lap. I wouldn't put her in the overhead. She's in my lap. And there's this big woman that was sitting next to me on my left. Every now and then I'd be worried about that bird. It was about a 3-hour flight. I get concerned, wanting to make sure the bird's okay, so I'd unzip it about 4 inches and I'd stick my hand in there and push against the hose, and she'd bite my finger and I'd jump, pull my hand out, and then I'd zip it back down. And I noticed that lady was watching me out of the corner of her eye. I never said a word.
That's so
But
funny.
anyway, sorry about that little side detail. But I got home. That bird caught a cock pheasant the first time I hunted it in the Bay Area. And it was about 100 yards out. And by the time I caught up with her, that pheasant had beat her senseless. She would never chase another one. I did catch a couple of mountain quail with her, but that sounds good and everything, but I was there a month. And I was hunting her almost every day. There was an old closed down water treatment plant that I could get into, and I'd spend, 20 minutes setting up the perfect slip, and then the bird would flush and she'd watch it fly away. But then one would get up out there 100 feet and she'd fly out there like it was the last. And then when she realized the tail chase wasn't going to work out, she'd rake over across a creek and go up in a tree and not want to come down, So when I got home, I put the word out, free Cooper's Hawk to good home. And a guy called me up from Austin, Texas. He said, I'll take her. I said, come get her. So he come got her, and about 2 weeks later, he called me up and told me that she had caught a bird and a great horned owl came in and killed her.
Oh my gosh.
So, no thanks. No thanks.
It's all about knowledge.
I like to fly the baddest mofo in the woods. So
The North American goshawk. Good. I'm glad to hear it.
Before we move on to the sharp-shinned hawk,
if I was going to fly an exhibitor, it would be a sharp-shin.
They're awesome.
I want to ask you, how do you respond when the bird inevitably nails the dog?
Well, this can get complicated because when a red tail nails a dog on the head, they fully intend to kill it. And you can't pull them off one toe at a time. That don't work. So what I do is I choke them off. Now that sounds pretty harsh, but it's not what you think. You just take your hand, put your palm of your hand on her beak, and you wrap your finger and your thumb around the throat, and then you start to squeeze. As soon as you start putting any pressure on their throat, they'll let go of the dog and they'll roll up to try to grab your hand. And when they do that, then you just roll them over 360 where they land on their feet, and you scoot the dog out of the way, and then you just dive for their legs because, the odds are if you dive for the jesses, you're going to miss. And she didn't learn anything. She's going right back for the dog. Once they decide the dog must die, they're not gonna change their mind. And what you do then, after you roll them off and scoot the dog in the way, and you just grab them by the legs. Well, that's kind of traumatic, for everybody. It's a train wreck, but there's a way to erase it, the whole thing. You get control of her jesses, you get her back up on the glove, and you put the hood on her. Now, the power of light and dark starts kicking. When the lights go out, the dog mentally and biologically starts moving towards a state of what I call neutrality. Ultimate neutrality, meaning sleep. But they'll get to a point where they're very close to shutting completely down into a neutral state. And when they get there, you'll know because they'll rouse. That rouse means shut down complete. And when you take the hood, you want to walk away from the place where it happened. Because if you reboot her and everything's the same, she'll boot back up to what happened, and the thing you didn't accomplish anything. You just have to move away 10 or 15 feet, just so that when she boots up, she won't be seeing everything exactly the same, and she'll boot up to a brand new day. What just happened a couple of minutes ago is no longer in the present, it's in the past and not relevant. And you can start them again. I had one bird, red tail, that had, it was a bird I took from a guy transferred it to me. She was a great bird, but she'd never been flown with a dog. So I went through a process of trying to get her, working with the dog and tolerating the dog. But when it got out in the woods, she was pretty regular about if you didn't get something going in about 20 minutes, the dog was plan B. And she'd go for the dog. And so, that's where I learned how to do this process to choke them off and scoop out the dog, get control of them, hood them up, wait until they shut down and reboot them. And when you did that, I'd tell the dog, you got about 20 minutes, buddy. If I was you, I'd get out there and get something going, And I didn't fly that bird the next season. I got rid of it. If you're going to use a dog, your best bet is start with a new bird. And from the very beginning, the bird needs to see you, see the dog every time it sees you. In other words, the bird needs to accept you and the dog as one package. Now, I never let the dog go in the chamber, but the dog will follow me out to the chamber, and then I'll sit it and stay it. You see why obedience is so important. I'll sit and stay the dog outside the door and go in and do my business. And then I'll go back out, and then the dog will follow me back to the house. And so the bird sees me come with the dog and go with the dog. So they should be one package. And then, of course, like I said, when you get to that surrender rate, if you've done all that up to this point, they'll accept the dog. Not a problem. And once you get when you first get them out in the field working together, they're both working for themselves. The dog's not working for the bird, and the bird's not working with the dog. They just go out there, and every now and then something happens. The dog will bump up something or whatever, and after that happens a couple of times, the bird starts to recognize the value of the dog. That's when they start to come together as a team, where the bird follows the dog and the dog follows the bird. If the bird moves, the dog learns, just like I learned, to tell the difference between just a move from point A to point B, or what I call a move of interest. There's a difference in the flight. There's a difference in the wing flap. Red tails are master conservationists of energy. And when they're just going from point A to point B, and they're from an elevated perch, typically they'll fall out of the perch and use gravity to build up some speed so that then they can glide and use as little of flapping as they have to use to get from point A to point B. Whereas if it's a point of interest, there will be very little drop in their movement from point A to point B, and the wing beat will be a little bit more. So you can tell, and the dog learns that on its own. The dog learns to tell the difference. They hear the bells. If they've been working with this dog for a while, they'll hear the bells and they'll stop and they'll watch the bird. And you'll notice that sometimes the dog will run after the bird, to where the bird's going. And other times he'll just watch them go, and when they land, he gets back down and starts working again. That's because he's learned the difference. He's learned to recognize the difference between a move of interest and just a move, and the bird will start to learn the body language of the dog. Like if the dog starts yapping, or if the dog squeals, usually when a Jack Russell or a lot of other dogs will flush something and they start chasing, they're yapping the whole way, squealing, some of them. Well, the bird learns to recognize that behavior and knows something's up. If a dog goes into a brush pile and starts barking, the bird recognizes that, and she'll position herself because she knows it's going to pop out, and that's so cool. That is so cool to see that happening, but it ain't going to happen unless you're on your job. If you're not doing your job, if you're not paying attention, if you're not managing this team, then it's just going to be a disaster. So, okay, I'm okay with that.
That's great.
It's good to hear you talk about dogs. And I think until you've done it, it's hard to wrap your mind around.
And once you've done it, it's hard to ever imagine not doing it.
It's when I go out with people and they're like, oh, my bird doesn't fly with dogs. I'm like,
let's get back in the truck and leave.
Yeah, let's just, all right, I'll see y'all later.
There's a way to do it, and there's a way to not to do it. You just don't throw a dog in a, rarely that might work. I knew a guy in Dallas that flew but now this was an imprint red tail.
That's fun.
And he went to the pound, got a little raggedy dog, and threw them together,
Do you call it patient zero?
Well, it came from the pound,
1.
so if she kills it and eats it, it's no big deal, But anyway, he threw that dog together with that bird, and the bird never went after the dog, and it worked out. But that's the exception, the great exception to the rule, especially with a Harris hawk. Harris hawks are bad about going after dogs.
Yeah, they don't like dogs.
Red tails, a lot of times red tails, more often than not, they won't go after the dog if you throw them together. But if the dog is with you and you're going through the woods and you haven't properly introduced these two to tolerate one another, then what happens is every time you get close to the bird, it bumps out.
Yeah, that's annoying.
You get caught, bumps out, and you can't get them to come back. And they're not going to as long as the dog's there. So now you got to do something with the dog before you can get the bird back. So, like I tell everybody, do it right the first time. Take the time, put in the effort, follow the steps. Don't take no shortcuts. And if you'll do that, you will have the most unimaginably beautiful falconry experience that can be had. There's nothing that can top. I mean, people that don't use a dog, they're having a great time and they're, really enjoying everything.
They think they are.
Well, they are, but they don't know how much more it could be.
They're just peasants. They don't know.
Until
Who doesn't have a dog in here?
How many people hunt with a dog? Okay, a couple. So the rest of you.
Richard does, but I don't think he's with us anymore.
Yeah. Ben would raise his hand, but he's over there.
He's asleep.
Yeah,
I have that effect. I have that effect on people. If you remember in Jonathan's interview, he asked me one question and I talked for 3 hours.
No, it's like you talk to people about that, and it's almost like they roll their eyes and they're like, "Yeah, I know. I kind of like what I'm doing now." And
yeah, well,
and it's like you're just literally just bashing your head against the wall. Like people who rabbit hawk and they don't have a dog. I'm like, what? Like, what are you doing?
That's work.
Yeah, it's ridiculous. It's too much.
The thing is, though, I don't want anybody to add a dog if they're not just obsessed about wanting to do it. It's not something that it is going to be a lot of work, And if something happens to your bird on a good weekend, you can trap another one in 3 weeks. You're back in business. But a dog is not like that. If something happens to that dog, you're talking about 6 to 8 months to get back. Yeah. To anywhere close to where you were. So the dog is a much more valuable tool because, like I say, the loss of a bird can be remedied very quickly, But the loss of a good, well-trained dog is a huge, huge loss. It's devastating. Trust me, I know. I'm still grieving from the loss of my Jack Russell.
Sorry for your loss.
I had him for 16 years. That's the only thing I want to warn people about having a dog is you grow to be so close to them and attached to them, and they're so important to you, and they don't live as long as people.
You build a much stronger bond with your dog when you hunt with it.
Right. Because it's with you at home too. Yeah. It's with you all the time. It is literally a companion. And so the loss of a dog is devastating, and it's going to happen. They don't live forever. And I was very fortunate. Jack Russell Terriers are usually dead within 5 years from getting into some kind of trouble. For a Jack Russell Terrier to have a 16-year-long career in falconry was amazing, but no less difficult to deal with when the loss came finally. So that's the big drawback, really, for me. That's the biggest drawback is the fact that you're going to grow to love this animal deeply, and it's going to die before you do, probably.
Yeah.
So
what does Teddy say? She lets herself cry for 24 hours, and then she starts figuring out the next one.
Yeah.
Well, see, I
she
can't
gives herself
do that.
24 hours.
She's tougher than us, though.
Yeah, evidently, because Trapper died about 5 years ago, and I'm still grieving. Still grieving. In fact, it's really he was a legend. That dog. I made him a legend. Yeah, I'll take the credit for that, because a dog is just a leg humping, pissing on the fire hydrant pet, you know. Until he's like a diamond, they chip off, or like a sculpture. I've heard a guy say one time, how do you make this beautiful sculpture? I just chip off the stuff that don't belong. You know, we're training a dog is the same way. You just get rid of the things that don't belong, and you take advantage of the good part.
Yeah,
the good part. And dogs love to work. I don't use corporal punishment. It's either they get what they want or they don't get what they want. There's no violence involved. Because if you force train a dog, some people do. I train them from the inside out. I train my birds the same way. You know, I train my birds in such a way that I manipulate their surroundings, their stimulus that will cause them to make a decision on their own to do what I want them to do, but yet allow them to feel like it was their decision to do it. If you train an animal from the inside out, they are truly changed. You know, if you train a dog from the outside in, or a bird, you know, and I consider all that, stuff force training. If you train either one of those animals from the outside in, they're only that animal when you're there. They're not that animal all the time. So I'm all about training, and you can get really good results without ever having to be violent with the animal, without ever having to punish the animal. You know, really, you can get more flies with honey than you can with salt.
That's right.
Were you always this way with that philosophy?
Pretty much. Well, you know, when I first got into falconry, I did it the way everybody else did it.
Yeah.
And of course, after the honeymoon ended, you know, and this became routine, it just really kind of ate at me. And I was always trying to figure out a kinder and gentler way to get the same results. And as it turned out, when I finally stumbled onto this answer to that by accident, it turned out it was not only a kinder and gentler way, it was a better and faster way.
Training the birds.
Our dog. The difference between a bird and the dog is that the bird don't have any friends and ain't looking to make any. You know, they're all about them.
Yeah.
The world revolves around them and what they want, right? Whereas the dog is a social animal. They want to please. And if you're the source of the pleasure, you're the one they want to please.
Right.
You know, and that's a powerful tool.
Yeah.
You know? So
it's just for me, I agree with everything you're saying about being kinder and gentler, but dogs, like their language is not
kind
pleasant.
and gentle.
It's not kind and gentle. The only language they speak is, you just see the way dogs interact with each other and wolves in a pack. If a wolf does something it's not supposed to do, the alpha or next in line is going to put them in their place. And,
right.
and I'm just saying this in terms of.
You just made my point, because the difference between the raptor and the dog is that the dogs are social.
Yes.
You know, and that's a huge difference.
No, yeah, I'm not talking. Yeah,
so
your method
requires a different approach
100%, yes.
of the whisper.
Yes.
You know, it requires a different approach.
We harp on that on the show all the time about the whole ice cream cone picture thing, you know, living room. Your method of in the chamber, calm, making it the bird's idea, that whole thing, that is it's like the best way that you could do it, I think.
It actually is.
I think so. And I did it with this goshawk I had. I had no hope of him ever doing anything, complete spaz, late pulled eyes. And I only started hunting him like a month and a half ago. I would go in his chamber every night since, you know, July, August, and just tidbit, fly into the wall, leave the tidbit, leave, go back in the next night. Then it was he would land on the ground. Then I'd give him the tidbit. Then it was all right. Now you got to jump to the glove. This has been going on for like months. And we caught 2 rabbits at the meet. He's all right. He's a little skittish still, but he's a good bird. And it was like basically your method.
Now we're talking about the difference between the psyche of a red tail as compared to an accipiter. We're talking about the difference between a truck and a Corvette.
Lamborghini, but yeah.
Yeah, or Lamborghini. I'll go that. Or a Triumph. But the whole mentality thing is a little different, which requires more patience on your part and more persistence and a more detailed plan of how the action. The object is red tails or any birds of prey. I always, red tails are my passion. They're not the only birds I've ever flown, but I've flown more of them than anything else. They're more receptive to slighter things than the accipiters are. The accipiters tend to overreact to things than the red tail does. And that makes the red tail an easier bird to train. I don't want to oversimplify it, but I've trained an accipiter, a couple of them. I've trained them, and there is a big difference but the same principles will work.
Yeah.
Now, I don't train captive bred birds. I have no interest in captive bred birds. So when I'm talking about all these things that I'm talking about in regards to training, I'm speaking of a wild caught bird, not a captive bred. I don't claim to know anything about the captive bred bird. I stick to my wheelhouse. My wheelhouse is bootios and parabootios, but by saying that, my method would work.
Well, it did. Just took forever.
It worked on my Cooper's hawk.
Yeah, it works. I think that's like, who were we talking about? We were talking about with somebody, Matt Starnes. He was talking about, he wants to do that method with the coops.
Mm-hmm. It'll work on any bird. He
wants to do it with the coops.
Yeah, I promise you.
I think it's like, it's like, it may actually just, coops are pretty tough birds in terms of, but like, passage goshawks, like they get sick and die when you start doing like
right. Stress.
Yeah. So
stress is a major killer of accipiters. Yeah. Well, this method that I use, it removes stress from the mix.
Yeah.
Because when you go out there to leave that first gift, you're going to try to you don't make eye contact with them. You don't act like you even notice they're there, and you're very stealthy, and your progress is determined by their response. If they start to get antsy, you stop and wait until they calm down and you move forward. Well, with a red tail, that might go a little faster.
Right. Yeah.
Than it would be a goshawk. I would go so far as to say, and I don't, I'm not an expert on any accipiter by any means, but I would say that it would probably be more involved and require a lot more patience with an accipiter than it does, but it will work.
Yeah.
It will work. I noticed this thing about now, and I'm going to probably offend both of you when I say this. There's a lot of different birds that people fly, a lot of different quarries. And, I've been doing this for almost 50 years. So I've seen a lot of people and a lot of birds, and I've kind of studied falconers and why they go the route they go, and like my buddy that's into the accipiters, he likes to solve problems. With him, a little victory is a big deal. It's like, baby, brush your hair and get dressed. We're going out to eat. Because the bird did little something. The bird did a little something that was positive. Me, on the other hand, I'm not so much into the training. That's just something I have to do to get to where I really want to be, and that's out in the woods looking for squirrels, you know. But with these people that are into the exhibitors, I've noticed a kind of a
What do you mean by
commentary.
these people? No, I was kidding.
You people.
Yeah.
Okay, let me
I'm
tell
actually flying
you
a red.
people.
I'm flying a red tail.
Okay, good. Good for you, buddy. You finally wised up. But no, seriously, I understand we all have our own individual personal makeup and our own sense of pleasure. What pleasures you and pleasures me. What pleasures me is for me to, for things to go right. For me to go out there based on the weather, put the bird on the scales based on that bird's weight and the weather, I can kind of predict how things are going to go today. And most often they do. They go exactly the way I thought. That's me. That you may think that's lazy, but I've noticed with my exhibitor friends that they're into the problem solving part. You know, those little victories is where they get their, you know, their adrenaline, you know, and
He's absolutely right about that.
that's
not me.
I
wanna go
want
out and
things
kill
to go
stuff.
right. I like things to go smooth. I like to be able to put the bird on the scales and based on the weather and the weight, kind of have a good idea how things are going to go. And then we go out there, and usually 99% of the time they go just about the way I.
Yeah, but it's the same with a goshawk. It's this a goshawk is. It's just,
To your point, last year me and Casey went on a trip to West Virginia to go bear hunting, and we brought our birds with us because our host wanted to see
hunting
falconry.
bears with goshawks.
Yep. So I brought a red tail. He brought a goshawk.
2 goshawks.
You brought 2? Yeah, you did.
Yeah.
And we make the trip to West Virginia, and I get, you know, we get to the guy's property, and he's a YouTuber, a big YouTuber. So he has his cameraman with us and all. And I was up to fly first. I let the red tail's at the right weight. She's been living in a box for days. She drove 8 hours to West Virginia,
And they'll endure that.
and how do you think it played out? She was at the right weight.
Well, I really don't know.
She followed everybody like a dream.
Yeah.
First squirrel we
Well, that's
flushed.
what I would assume.
Yeah, she catches the first squirrel we
You know, if
see.
she was well trained, well manned, and hunted frequently, she's at the right weight. She's within the weather window. You know, there's no other dynamics that are coming here. You're not trying to fly her and, you know, cotton bow over 16,000 fans. You know, we're just hunting. You pull her out of the box. Red tails are very, and I'm assuming all birds of prey are this way, but you know, the red tails is what taught me. I learned from the red tails. So I'm always coming from that place, you know. But red tails are always what's the word I'm looking for?
Reliable.
Well, they are that most of the time.
Cool.
But
That's
they're
what you
very
were.
predictable.
I thought you wanted to say cool.
Yeah, well, they are. but they tend to be more predictable. You know, you get all the circumstances together, and if you know that bird or that species, if you know that really well, if you're very familiar with that, then you can kind of almost predict how things are going to go. Now, there's other dynamics that may pop into it that weren't planned, that can cause everything to go off the rails, you know. But generally speaking, with a red tail, now my buddy, you know, we've been practicing falconry the same length of time. The guy that I talked about that we went for the Cooper's Hawks, you know, nest, and you know, I like to be able to kind of somewhat predict how things are going to go. But what I found, because I've flown an exhibitor, and of course with my buddy, he's flown a lot of exhibitors, and me with him. So I only have that secondary experience of observation with all of his birds. But with a red tail, you take the bird's weight. You know the bird. You've been working with this bird. You take the bird's weight and the weather conditions, and the location, how the location is set, what kind of ecology you're going to be flying in. And you can kind of pretty well sit down and predict how things are going to go. And I'd say vast majority of the time, you're right. And see, and that's the way I like falconry. I don't like to be taken by surprise as far as behavior is concerned, you know. But with an accipiter, I mean, things can happen that you don't know what set it off, you know, and you know, things go off the rails, and you may or may not see what the cause was, but rest assured they saw it. You know, it makes sense to them. It may not make sense to you. It's kind of that way with a red tail or a Harris hawk, but in a simpler way. You know, the red tails and the Harris hawks are a lot more predictable, and behavioral issues are a little easier to sort out than the accipiters, or at least that's been my observation as an outsider. Yeah. You know, practicing with the Budios and Parabudios, having some experience with the accipiters, and having a very close friend. You know, for a long time, Kevin and I were the only two falconers in East Texas. So, you know, we were always together. We learned together. We hunted together. He did his thing, and it was really fun for me to go watch him do his things most of the time. But go ahead.
The West Virginia trip, I'll skip what happened in between, but his goshawk did ultimately catch a squirrel too.
Good. Yeah, I know a guy up in Wisconsin.
I was waiting. I don't know what point he was going to make, and I was going to say, okay, well then, how was your flight versus my flight after the BS at the truck that I had to work out? Red tail smashed it. Beautiful red tail flight, and then my flight was a little bit of a train wreck from the car to where we got, and then she went right up and corkscrewed around the tree, smashed it on the ground, lost it, got up, smashed it again, and then caught it right in front of the camera guy and wrapped it up. So, Gary, have you ever been on a squirrel hunt with a goshawk before?
Yes.
Okay. And what did you think of it?
It was an American goshawk.
Yeah.
Okay, not a Siberian or any of those.
They're very temperamental, so like they'll
absolutely.
They'll
and
make
I'll tell you what,
yeah. The Siberians, the fin birds, they're like a big red tail.
The goshawk chases that I've seen on squirrels, and I've seen them many of them, and I don't recommend it.
Why not?
Well,
here we go. Here we go.
I see the goshawk as being a little overmatched in a number of ways. Not all.
I couldn't disagree with you more.
Okay, well we'll have that argument here. Let me say my piece. What I have observed in goshawk and squirrels is that they have a tendency to pester them to death until they finally get an opening and they get it. Okay, whereas a red tail is like bonsai. Right. They'll get a foot on them anywhere. A goshawk will be a little more touchy about grabbing it. If the squirrel turns on them, they'll let go of it.
Right. Yeah.
You know, and unfortunately, it's been my experience that if you pussyfoot around with a squirrel long enough, they'll find a hole.
I agree. Yeah.
Okay. And it's the same thing with that. The guy that I saw flying goshawks on squirrels, in a state up north. I won't say who or where.
What state?
Wisconsin.
Oh, they don't know what they're doing up there. No,
anyway, this guy was a really, really good goshawk.
No, sure, yeah.
He also bred goshawks. And because of his interactions in the breeding goshawks, you know, he had to fly them because he couldn't, you know, that'd be another bird he'd have to take on and care for. Where he had these goshawks he was breeding, so he used the goshawks. And basically, this is my observation, okay? I'm not a goshawker, don't claim to be. I'm not an authority on accipiters by any means. I'm sure that if you've flown a few goshawks, you know way more about goshawks than I do. I only know what I've seen. And what I have seen in the goshawk squirrel world is that the goshawks just pester them until they make a mistake. They want to go for the head. But in the event that they grab the squirrel and the squirrel turns on them, the red tail has a lot more meat on their feet. The goshawk is little bony toes, and just about any bite that occurs on the foot or toes is going to be a bad bite because the bones and tendons are right there. Whereas, with a red tail, I prefer the female for squirrel hawking. I think she's the ultimate. The three best birds for squirrel hawking is number 1, the female red tail, number 2, the male red tail, and number 3, the female Harris hawk.
God, he's seething over there, Gary.
And
I just, like a Harris hawk's feet. Harris hawk's feet are more similar to a goshawk's
right,
feet, and
they're not as meaty as a red tail.
They have no instinct or desire to even remotely not get bit.
Right.
So
that's the buteo part of the parabuteo.
They grab and hold on just like a red tail, but they don't have the feet to back it up, and then they get.
Well, they have you have to admit that there's more meat on a female Harris hawk feet than there is on a goshawk foot.
Depends what goshawk.
I've never seen a goshawk that had meaty feet.
Yeah.
Other than a Siberian.
You gotta get out more. No, I'm just kidding.
other than a Siberian.
Yeah, like the birds they're breeding now, these crosses, these 50-50 birds. They're 1,300 grams, 1,250, and their feet are bigger, if not bigger and longer than a red tail, but not as thick.
I'm not speaking of captive bred goshawks or
North American
hybrids. I'm speaking of the American goshawk.
North American, they got small.
I recently hunted with a guy that had a Siberian that flew at 42 ounces. And she had some feet. They weren't red tail feet.
No, yeah.
But they were substantially more meaty than all the American goshawks that I've seen fly.
Yeah.
American goshawks that I've seen fly, their feet were like, spindly.
Spindly.
Yeah, that's a good way to describe it.
Yeah, that's a good way.
If they get bit,
It's
they're in
kind of
trouble.
like
But they don't really
hunting
get bit.
squirrels with an accipiter or a buteo is like the difference between ballet and sumo wrestling. And I want
I think that was an insult. I think.
it depends on what you think about ballet.
That's true.
It's definitely an insult. There.
He just revealed what he thought about ballet.
But on the other hand, I want to stack the deck as far in my favor, in the bird's favor as I can.
Yeah.
And so I personally, and this is just Gary, I would not fly an accipiter against squirrels, because, especially a fox squirrel,
We're going to try tomorrow.
Yeah. And I pray you have a good day, but for me personally, I want to stack the deck in the favor of me and the bird, especially the bird. I don't want to hurt. Now, what I saw in the goshawks that I have seen fly on squirrels, it's a completely different flight. I mean, they pester the squirrel to try to get it to make a mistake, to open up a shot for a head hit, but that don't always work out. And if that goshawk grabs a squirrel in the wrong way, like a cat squirrel, what y'all call grays, we call them cat squirrels.
Oh, yeah, I didn't know that. That's cool.
But a cat squirrel they're like a snake with fur on it. I mean, they're very flexible. They can bend around, whereas a fox squirrel is a much bigger animal, and you can grab them by the withers, and they can't turn around and bite you. But a cat squirrel, if you don't have it by the head, there's a huge risk there. And so, that's just my philosophy. If you're talking about the best birds for squirrel hawking, Tyler gave a speech at Enid at the NAFA meet on squirrel hawking. And
Tyler who?
Tyler.
That one.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Tyler
I don't know who we were referring to.
Tyler gave a speech on
There's
that.
a lot of Tylers
There
in
are
this
a lot of
farm, right?
Tylers. At least like 7, right?
I live close to a town called Tyler. But anyway, see, I've lost track of thought here. Where were we?
Your
Tyler's
philosophy.
speech.
We got in the argument about the best bird at the end of my speech, right?
Oh, that was my buddy Rashad with his Siberian goshawk.
You don't hate on my buddy Rashad. Shout out to Rashad.
He's a falconer. He's out
hilarious.
of Atlanta.
Yeah, he was on the podcast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
he was on.
Yeah, Rashad is a character.
Yeah, oh, yes, he is. He's good for he's a friend of mine.
Anyway, after Tyler gave his speech at the NAFA meet, I was going to keep my mouth shut. Tyler, I wasn't gonna pop in there and have.
To hear from you.
Well, I don't want to come across as a know-it-all, although I am pretty knowledgeable. I've been doing this for nearly 50 years, and probably 48 of those years is specialized in squirrels. I've flown Harris Hawks on squirrels, and I thought, I turned general. You have to understand, when I got into falconry, squirrels were taboo. It was irresponsible and unethical to pit a bird of prey against a squirrel. Because where you catch a rabbit or a jack, they'll kick and they'll scream, but then at some point they'll go into shock and accept their fate. Squirrel, not so. Squirrel's going to fight to their last breath, and they got teeth and claws, and they'll use every one of them, So it's a formidable quarry. And the red-tails got the power. Yeah, they're not picky about where they put a foot on. And they get nipped, but they got feet that are built to take a bite. Most of them. I mean, they're not immune by any means, but they're certainly better equipped to tackle an animal like that than anything else. And, I tell people, and don't be offended when I say this.
Too late.
When there was a question that was asked at Tyler's speech, this guy asked me, and I couldn't believe that, somebody didn't know this. But this guy asked, what's the best bird for squirrel hawking? Without question. I was not going to say anything, Tyler. I was going to keep my mouth shut, but this guy asked that question and people were hawing around. And I finally said, I asked Tyler, I said, you remember? I said, you mind if I make a comment on
Rashad
that?
asked that question?
No.
Oh, I was going to say.
No, some other guy asked that.
Call him right now.
Rashad. We're getting to that.
Okay. Here we go.
And I said, unquestionably, non-debatable. Any argument against what I'm about to say would be based on ignorance. The female red-tail is without a doubt the best tool
100%.
for hunting squirrels. 100%. The best tool.
Yeah, I agree.
I said this.
I do agree with that.
And the tiercel red-tail comes in second, a close second. I've seen a lot of tiercel, and the female Harris hawk comes in a distant third.
The female Harris hawk shouldn't even be in the conversation.
Well, I disagree with that. Well,
Tree squirrels are not even part of their diet. They're not equipped to take bites, and they have.
But they'll go after them.
Sorry, go
But
ahead.
they'll go after them.
I'm getting triggered.
But now, let me say.
Sorry.
Let me say this.
I need an e-collar.
What was your first name?
Casey.
Casey.
Yes.
Let me say this, Casey. I flew Harris Hawks for about the first 10 years of my falconry experience as a general. Once I hit general. Because I live in Texas, we have access to the wild birds. For a long time, we thought we were the only ones that had them, and we were quite smug about that. So I've never flown a captive bred Harris hawk, but you look at the feet of a female Harris hawk, and it's just a little meatier than a female goshawk. Substantially, really. But when you go from the foot of a goshawk to the foot of a female red-tail. And not all female red-tails are endowed. That's up to the falconer when he's trapping to select a bird that has the right conformation. So when I'm talking about all these birds and their preferences, I'm speaking from a point that I don't just trap a red-tail and start hunting squirrels with it. They got to meet a certain criteria.
Yeah.
I'm looking to stack that deck in my favor. In her favor, because it's her physical body that's going to be at risk, not mine. I mean, I've been bit by a squirrel, got bit right here in the taint. Taint finger and taint thumb.
Is that what that's called there?
Yeah, it's called a taint.
I thought it was somewhere else.
But anyway, so I gave that little spiel at the Enid meet about any argument against that is an argument based on ignorance.
I agree with that. Yeah.
And so after Tyler finished his speech, Rashad, he sauntered over there really quick. He galloped over there to me. Super nice guy. I really liked him.
Yeah, he's nice.
And he was a lot of fun. But anyway, he come over there and he says, I have to disagree with you, because he thinks the goshawk is a better choice.
Then what?
Than a red tail.
No.
Yeah.
He said a third. He said it was a third. He said it was a third.
Yeah, close third. But
It is the third.
I would have to disagree with that premise, and so I told him I wanted to go out with him the next day, and and I'm standing there looking at his goshawk's feet, and they got them spindly goshawk, long spindly toes.
This goshawk is huge. That's a big bird.
It is, but
It's like almost a 1,300 gram bird. It's a big bird.
Big bird, but that's
the feet on that bird are bigger than most Tiercel red tail feet by far.
What's more important than size is the foot size, the amount of meat that's on the feet.
We're going to have a debate because they don't get bit. They're not designed to take a bite because their biology, they don't want to get bit. So they don't need the meat. The meat is not even, it's a moot point.
Right.
They're not going to sit and just get chewed on.
But I am aware of a number of goshawks. I'm aware of a number of red tails that's had a bad bite.
Goshawks will get bit, if they're too low, if they're not entered correctly. That happens. Stuff happens,
right.
But it's not. If you have a fit goshawk that's entered on squirrels, it's part of their natural diet in the wild. They're designed to dealing with squirrels. They catch them every day of the week in the wild. It's part of their diet.
Yeah, but even in the human world, they have weight classes for boxing or for MMA. They have weight classes,
right.
And the obvious reason is that, you want to pit one animal with another animal
right.
that's pretty close to being equal with it to see who's the most skilled, right?
Yeah.
Well, I don't go by those rules. I want to fly a bird that is overpowering, Like I say, I want to stack that deck as far in my favor as I can. And I will tell you this. A lot of people don't realize they haven't been in falconry long enough to know, to understand or have experienced the taboo opinions about hunting squirrels with any bird of prey.
Right.
This is what I was up against in the beginning.
There's still people out there. They're still there.
Yeah.
People say stuff all the time that he shouldn't be doing it, especially with a goshawk.
Right. And I'm not telling you not to do it. I'm not the law. I'm not the judge. I'm just dealing with physical facts, and based on many, many years of experience of watching the guy in Wisconsin. His name is Ujadowski. That's his last name. It took me a long time to learn how to pronounce that name. Ujadowski, Frank Ujadowski. That's probably the best goshawk squirrel flyer that I've ever witnessed. He was my liaison when I went to Wisconsin to speak up there. And I stayed with him. Of course, I went out with him every day. He flew goshawks because he had to. He admitted to me. Ujadowski admitted to me that the red tail was a much better tool.
Yeah, I admit that too. That's just a fact. That's not even.
I'm not saying the goshawk can't do it or that you're irresponsible for doing it.
Yeah,
because he did it with an American goshawk, which is a lot smaller than the Siberians and the Finns and all of that stuff.
Gary, if you just look at nest studies. They're just bringing gray squirrels to the nest all day long. They're killing gray squirrels every day of the week. That's what they eat. It's part of their diet.
Yeah, and I'm not going to deny that.
That's my point.
But nest studies don't tell the whole story. The nest. They're looking at these birds that are alive and healthy.
Right.
They haven't run into that squirrel that they couldn't handle. You know, those squirrels are no longer dead because you get crippled in the wild and you're a dead bird. You're going to starve. So all of those studies are done on birds that haven't run into that yet. I'm just looking at the physique, the weight. Like with the Siberian that Rashad had, she was an impressive bird.
Yeah, it's a good bird.
But while he was telling me how good of a squirrel hawk she was, I couldn't keep my eyes off of those feet and those toes. And I've been doing this for a very long time, specializing in squirrels and hunting them with hawks. I've hunted them with Harris's. I've hunted them with the red tails, and I've witnessed people hunting them with the goshawks. And having been a guy that was persecuted for a time for doing what I was doing, I'm not going to criticize anybody for hunting a squirrel I wouldn't criticize you. I mean, I would say it's not a good idea, but hunting a squirrel
why would
with
you
a
say
coon.
that? It doesn't make sense.
What?
That it's not a good idea.
He's told you that for like the past 10 minutes.
No, I understand, but I don't. The stuff that you were up against, flying squirrels with a red tail, and people giving you a hard time about it. That it's like the new generation is Rashad, other guys catching squirrels with goshawks. The goshawk is designed to catch squirrels.
I'm very happy to meet people like Rashad and you who are the future. I ain't going to be around but a few more years. And falconry is going to be in the hands of you and Rashad and other people, younger people, newer people. Yeah. And, my concern is because I've seen a lot of goofballs in falconry, that people that just play with it, and it's a hobby. I think most of the people in this room would agree that it's not a hobby. It's a lifestyle. To the point to where we're so obsessed with this thing that other people don't understand what we get out of it. And I've given up trying to explain to people why I love falconry so much. It's either in you or it's not in you. If it's in you, you can't not do it.
Agreed, yeah.
And having been a guy that was persecuted for a time, I was blackballed for 5 years. I wasn't a member of any club, including the Texas Club, of which I was a founding member of,
Just because you were chasing squirrels?
Yes.
Typical NAFA stuff,
One time, the president of a club that I was a founding member of called me up out of the blue, and the conversation began with, "Who the F do you think you are?"
Really?
Yeah.
Catching a squirrel?
For chasing squirrels. See, how long have you been in falconry?
20 years.
Okay.
It's my 20th season.
Then, yeah. So, squirrel hawking has become accepted. I think in 2003 it was when Daryl Perkins brought NAFA on board, which is why we're here today. NAFA's sponsoring, or the North Carolina Club is sponsoring this club, and NAFA's helping out. But there was a time when that wasn't so, and so for 5 years I kept to myself. Me and my other buddy in East Texas, we were the only two out there, and he's hunted squirrels with goshawks. I didn't criticize him, but we should all just be logical and look at the facts. And I'm not looking at the facts just from a fact-based thing, where I'm just observing. I'm doing this from experience and observation. And I'm just telling you that the best tool for the job is the female red tail, followed closely by the tiercel red tail, and then a little distant third is the female Harris hawk, because the bird that introduced me to squirrel hawking against my will, that drugged me into squirrel hawking, was a female Harris, wild-caught bird, not a captive. Wild-caught bird. She tackled the first squirrel that I ever caught was with a female wild-caught Harris hawk, and it was a 3+ pound fox squirrel. She was a 28-ounce female Harris hawk. Yeah. I had been told by somebody, my sponsor denies that he ever said this, but somebody said it to me, somebody with more experience than I had at the time. If your bird ever gets tangled up with a squirrel, don't run in on her, because if you do, you might distract her and cause her to get hurt. So when my bird took off after this squirrel, And I was trying to stop it. I had to lure her out. Man, I was trying to get her down, because from what I had been told, this wasn't going to end well. She grabbed the squirrel. She went to the ground, and a hell of a fight broke out. I squatted down and just watched. It seemed like an hour, but it might have been 4 or 5 minutes that she fought with this squirrel on the ground. Sometimes the squirrel was on top. Sometimes she was on top. When she was on top, she would squeeze to the point where her whole body just trembled. And after what seemed like a very long time, she stood up and started picking. I made into her. My heart was about to pound out of my chest because I just knew this bird that I'd went down and spent all this money and time trapping was ruined. Pulled her wings back, not a scratch anywhere. And it was at that point, after 2 years of not being able to kill a single rabbit in my whole turf. Well, I killed one. Excuse me. I killed a rabbit on my home territory the first time I flew my first red-tailed freak. And I thought, this is going to be a piece of cake. We're going to be whacking and stacking, And then I didn't kill another one on my home turf for the next 2 years. And my wife worked in the daytime. I worked at night. So I had every day. We had no kids. I had every day to be out there beating the bushes. So when she caught that squirrel, wrestled it into submission, and actually killed it, a squirrel that outweighed her by 1/2 pound, I knew where I had to go. I thought this was the answer until a few years passed. And that with that particular Harris hawk, she was electrocuted about 5 years later at the end of a squirrel hunt. We were going back to the truck. I had my Sunday school class with me. I took them out for the first time. There was a pole, and everybody should know this. It was an electric pole. It was just a straight up pole. It had a wire that went across about 1 foot from the top. Went across there, and then there was about 3 foot out before you get to that pole. There was a wire that came out and went over the top of the pole, and then 3 foot on the other side, it went back into the wire. I don't know what the purpose of that was, but I learned after the tragic loss of this bird. She was the best Harris hawk I'd ever had. None of the ones I flew after her were worthy to lace her shoes. But every one of those power poles out there has a ground wire on it. It's like a coat hanger wire that goes from the ground all the way to the top. And what had happened is we were going to the truck, and the truck was parked by one of those poles. There was no transfer, so I wasn't afraid.
Right.
I didn't see this coming. She flew over there and landed on the top of that pole, and one of her toes was sitting on that ground wire at the top. And when she stood up, she didn't even touch that other wire. She only got within about 2 inches of it. Pow!
Jeez.
It arced to her. Earlier, there'd been a kid on a bicycle with a pellet rifle or a 22, I don't know what it was, it came riding by. There was that explosion, and then she just dropped to the ground. And my first thought was that damn kid. Yeah. That damn kid shot my bird. I was looking for the little monster, but then as I ran towards my bird, my buddy Kevin, he had a Tiercel Harris hawk at the time, and when she hit the ground, he flew over there and hit her. That's just instinct, wounded animal, So as I got closer to her, I started smelling burnt feathers. And so when I got to her, and then I started flying other birds, other Harris hawks. I just figured all I got to do is go down and find a Harris hawk that fits this hood, get back in business. But I went through several Harris hawks after that were not anything near as good as her. So these birds, red-tails, Harrises, whatever you're talking about, there are some individuals that are better than others. That's why they have a mortality rate of 60 to 70% the first year. And when I'm out looking for a bird, I'm looking for a 30%er. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a 70%er. I'm looking for a 30%er, And but anyway, she had a hole in her toe that was perfectly round, black around the edge of it, about the size of a BB. And then in the back of her head, she had a hole about the size of a .22 bullet. And all the feathers were blown out, behind her head. And I don't know where I was going with all that. But anyway, a few years later, I had the first guy to come to me looking for sponsorship. And I told him, I said, okay, you're going to have to fly a red tail. Because back then, your choices as an apprentice were red tail, red shoulder, or kestrel, And I told him, you're going to have to fly a red tail, and squirrels is going to be your game. But as soon as you get your general permit, we'll load the truck. And we'll go down to the desert, and we'll get you a harris hawk, get you in business. 5 weeks later, this guy was kicking my ass with that red tail. Or you don't have to slap me in the face, to get me to notice. So that's when I went back to the red tail. So my journey has been through third best, second best, first best. You know what I'm saying? And then down the road, of course, my other buddy out there in East Texas, he likes the accipiter stuff, and so he got him a goshawk and was trying to hunt squirrels with that. And I've seen a lot of other people. Frank Jadowski is probably the best I've seen, as far as success. We caught a squirrel every day we went out, but it was a whole different chase. And it wasn't like the bonsai balls to the wall, get a foot on it, don't care where, and take it to the ground and subdue it that you get with the red tail. Those are all the things that I'm looking at and choosing a bird. My quarry is squirrels. I said one time at my very first speaking engagement was with my own club. After I'd been out of circulation as far as clubs were concerned for 5 years, when the president of the THA called me up and said, "Who the F do you think you are?" and then commenced to tell me what a sorry SOB I was for doing what I was doing.
It's crazy.
I went through that with him, and from that, my journey was paying attention to what was going on. I hadn't seen a goshawk chase a squirrel until later on in my falconry life, and the very reason for the taboo on hunting squirrels with falconry birds is based on the risk factor. And obviously, the majority of the falconry community felt like that certain birds were high risk and shouldn't be put against squirrels. Like I say, I'm not the police, so I'm not policing anybody as to what they do, because I've been judged. Yeah. I've been judged and criticized. I'm not going to do that to somebody else. I mean, I wish you the best. But with all the evidence combined, there's still, and now I know where I was going. If you were talking about the traditional birds in falconry pitted against squirrels, right? Squirrels fight to the death, tooth and claw, to their last breath. Like a rabbit or another kind of animal will kick and scream until they finally just go into shock and accept their fate. Not so with the squirrel. They will fight to their last breath. And, I can kind of see their point on a lot of birds, but with the red tail, that was the elephant in the room that nobody was noticing. And so when this apprentice of mine started really kicking butt with that red tail, that was another thing I learned. So I went back to the red tail, and I've been with her ever since. And it's all about, and the only reason I was able to get falconry, squirrel hawking legitimized, like I said, I'm not the first guy to ever kill a squirrel with a hawk. I'm not the first guy to ever do it on purpose, I'm pretty sure. But I am the guy that got it legitimized. And the way I did that, because the falconry community at that time was a wall when it came to squirrel hawking. It was a wall. And I experienced that wrath firsthand. But my strategy in getting this legitimized was to show that I was doing everything I could possible to stack the cards in favor of the bird. So choice of bird, protective equipment, and specialized technique. Choice of bird, pick the bird that it has that is the undisputed, best choice in tools. Equip it with protective equipment. I've noticed some people even here are not using squirrel chaps, but I devised all these protective equipments, and then the specialized technique is get your butt in there and get control of the risk factor, which is the head, and then dispatch it quick. And it was through all of that effort. I wrote an article for Hawk Chalk a number of years ago titled "Squirrel Hawking: Minimizing the Risk." And all of these articles that I wrote during that time were an effort to get people to condone what I was doing. And so based on all of that stuff that I said, the red tail was not ever taken into consideration about it. She's a big, bulky, heavy bird with a big wingspan for balance, on the ground tussle. She had the big, meaty feet that could take a bite. All these factors concerned. So you and I could argue here for 2 hours. You'd never change my mind.
I can see that.
That's actually about where we're at on this argument. Is 2 hours.
Because I would die. I would die my last breath. I would tell you that the goshawk is a far distant. If you want to do it, I'm not going to criticize you for doing it.
Appreciate it.
I wouldn't do that because I've been criticized. I know how that is, and I think that just like I worked it out with the protective equipment, specialized techniques, and all that business and got it, okay, I believe the same thing can be done with the goshawk. You adjust your technique to the risk. That's the whole thing, is the risk.
100%, yeah.
And so you develop your equipment, and when I got into falconry back in the late 70s, there were no vendors. You had to devise your own equipment. So, here I'm doing something that not only other people are not doing, or at least not admitting they're doing.
Right.
I had to devise my own design and build.
Did you develop squirrel traps as a thing?
As a what?
As just squirrel traps in general, the whole concept of squirrel traps.
Did you create squirrel traps?
Created. Whew, that's crazy. That's amazing. That's amazing. That's amazing.
Yeah.
Ben's making some real nice squirrel chaps right now.
Yeah. Well, they got
rabbit hawking on
They
Instagram.
got 8 toes, but they only got 2 legs. Okay, you injure one toe and the bird might be able to go on and finish its career. But you injure a leg and you're out. It's a rehab, And so the only way that squirrel hawking became legitimized is because we demonstrated that we were going to do everything possible to minimize the risk. And
are you willing to do that, Casey?
Huh?
Are you willing to do that?
100%.
Yeah. So, like I say, I've watched goshawks go after squirrels, and I enjoyed it. I'm anxious to watch Rashad's big Siberian bird go after squirrels. In fact, we went out to try to put her on squirrels in Enid.
Yeah.
We couldn't find any. It's kind of semi-desert. But at any rate, I enjoy all that. But as for me, look, if everybody credits me as the guy that brought squirrel hawking to the mainstream.
100%.
And I did that by overkilling, the attempt to do it safely. And my fear has always been that now that we're accepted, that people would take that for granted. See, because most of the people that are in falconry today, they weren't practicing falconry back when it was taboo, back when you would have been ostracized for doing it. And I put a lot of work in to proving to the rest of the falconry community that we could do this, and we could do it with a reasonable amount of safety. One year, a couple of years, I did a study on my own. Every year in the issue of Hawk Chalk that comes out after the season is over, all the club reports. Johnny flew a red tail, Billy flew a falcon, all these club news and then they would say Sammy's red tail got bit by a squirrel, and then there'd be 3 paragraphs about the evils of putting your birds on squirrels, right? And so I was up against all, but I did a study. And I realized that, especially at that time, the per capita participation of squirrel hawking as opposed to all the other so-called traditional falconry was off balance. And I took that into consideration because earlier in that article, before they got to the evils of squirrels, there was falcons getting hit by trucks chasing ducks across the interstate. Yeah. There were red tails getting decapitated, stooping in on a rabbit in a barbed wire fence. There were all of these maladies, and then their comment at the end of all comment at the end of all that was, well, that's falconry. Every time we take these birds out and we put them up, there's a risk involved, Yeah. And so what I determined by my study about all the things that can happen to a bird that's not hunting squirrels, that's hunting traditional game, that it was, if you followed those 3 rules that I gave, selection of bird, pick the right bird for the job, put protective equipment on them, and modify your technique to get your ass in there and neutralize that risk as soon as possible, they began to come around. They began to understand. They noticed that Gary was trying to do this as safely as possible. And I can tell you that over my 47 years, I've never crippled a bird. But they've all been red tails except for the one Harris hawk that was exceptional, and she was electrocuted. That's how she ended. So I'm not trying to be debating. I'm not trying to be argumentative with you about.
Me neither. I just can't help myself.
I don't want you to think that I look down on you or criticize you for what you're doing, because I know what that feels like. I ain't going to do it because I got confidence that you will work it out, and you'll figure out a way to make it safe, because I think you're that kind of guy.
It is safe.
I think. Well,
don't fly your goshawk starving or low. If the bird is heavy in condition, it'll never allow itself to get bit. It'll never hold on and get bit.
Yeah, and put about another pound on her and some meat on her feet.
Then give her a red tail and we're good.
You realize it's 2-1.
No, it's all right.
Let's move on.
I will say this though, in closing, to your point, we have well established on the show through informal polls and conversation that it is statistically more dangerous for you to hunt rabbits than it is squirrels. Yeah. By far.
I wouldn't disagree with that.
By far.
I
don't know anybody that I know, like a couple people that had an incident, but everybody that I personally know that had a bird died in the field in pursuit of something was always chasing a rabbit, and the rabbit went through something and the bird smashed it behind it and killed itself.
Well, you and I are not disagreeing on the fact that the risk of
Am I wrong?
Squirrel hawking may be.
We're
not disagreeing on the fact that any quarry can be dangerous to a bird's health, because we got these birds that are flinging themselves recklessly abandoned at things, and it's not always the quarry that causes the damage. It's the obstacles that are involved in the flinging.
Correct, yeah.
So that study that I did myself proved exactly what you just said.
Yeah. It's so true.
So we're in agreement about that.
Yeah, 100%. Yes.
And I think we're in agreement on the idea that the red-tailed female is the absolute.
We're in 100% agreement on that.
Queen. She is the only. Listen to me. Now, this may.
But I agree with you on that.
This may tick you off what I'm about to say.
Go ahead.
Not intentionally.
Okay, yeah.
Okay, but
It doesn't take much, Gary.
yeah.
Yeah, I'm wound tight.
So
Like Richard Moats.
we both
MidnightFalconry.com.
agree that the red-tailed is the undisputed. She's the only bird that can really actually be called squirrel hawk.
No, I agree with
And
that.
see, Rashad rushed up to me after I made my statement at Enid, and he wanted to argue in good humor,
Yeah.
in good faith.
Yeah, he's the nicest guy. Yeah.
That he wanted to make an argument for his Siberian being, should be on that list, of good birds for squirrel hawking. But I'm looking at those feet the whole time, and I'm thinking, except for that, But so anyway, I think
You're
you and
like
I,
double the size of a female
I
Harris.
think you and I agree. I think
You're
you
like
and,
twice the size of a female Harris.
all right. Listen,
We'll agree to disagree on that one.
no.
But I would implore just
No,
please
we're not.
consider
We'll-
it. Change that third spot. Just swap that spot for a female Euro
Well,
gossip.
that was Rashad's argument.
Yes, we would
And,
die if you did that. If you publicly said that.
He would be a fool not to argue that because he's flying a Siberian on squirrels.
Yeah, but if there's a lot
So
that
you
proves
and
the
I
point.
agree to disagree on where the position of the goshawk falls, and when I'm talking about goshawks, I'm talking about the American goshawk.
I still agree that it should be the third. I still agree with that.
Let's bring the
you and
audience.
Rashad. But now, one more comment.
This guy's so non-confrontational. He just gets so
but
nervous.
Let me make one.
Let the men talk here. We're working something out. Okay, take a break. All right, go sit in the chair. Put your blanket on your lap.
Listen. Okay, we agree to disagree on a specific point.
Yeah.
But I think you and I agree on more than we disagree.
No. Yeah, we definitely agree. 100%.
So, and I
watched your movie 1,000 times. Okay.
Yeah. Well, that
my
movie
hero.
was made a long time ago. Well, thank you. I'm very flattered about that.
Yes, you are.
And I don't know that I deserve that.
You do.
But anyway, the final comment I'm going to make on that is that, I have the reputation of being the guy that got squirrel hawking legitimized in the American falconry community. And so if it goes bad, if it goes bad, they're not going to come to you and say, look, I told you this was going to happen.
Yeah, no, they're not.
And I'm
just
going to
gonna
be
hit
the
a
one
brick wall.
taking the criticism. So I'm very guarded.
No, I get it.
I hope you understand
I
that.
100% get it. Yeah.
Because squirrel hawking now is the fastest growing part of falconry in America today.
100%. Yeah, it is.
And
You can't,
and
if you
so-
can't live in America and be a falconer without going after squirrels in the East Coast and anywhere where there's woods. You'd be foolish to not go after squirrels.
Well, I
Doesn't
tell
make sense.
people that west of the Mississippi River that have any kind of negative comment about squirrel hawking, I said, you go across that Mississippi River and say that, you'll get your ass whooped.
Yeah. Exactly. Because the guys out west, they can hawk in sneakers and shorts.
Right.
We actually have to.
Hunting alley cats on roller skates in the alleys.
Yeah.
But anyway, let's move on. I think we got that.
Let's,
We worked it out.
Let's bring the audience into this. Let's take advantage of the live audience here, and let's open the floor to some questions and comments. Oh, we got the Maharaja of North Carolina. I'm sorry, Tyler.
Are
Let me get him.
you Indian?
I need a shower.
He's from the other side of the border, the line.
So I have a friend, a very close friend who's Indian in Alabama.
All right.
Jatin Patel. Do you know him? Do you know Jatin?
I know.
And believe it or not,
So funny.
he runs motels.
Okay, so I'm not Indian and I don't own motels, but Gary, my name is Raja and I live in Texas just like you.
Yes, sir.
But I grew up here. So when I lived here, my sponsor, Judge Joe Craig, is a huge fan of you. So I read all of your books, Bushy Tails and Beauties, A to Z. Now, earlier today you mentioned something that really struck me, and it said when you are looking for a bird, you're looking for the 30% bird,
Right.
not the 70%.
Right.
Do you believe as a falconer in modern day era, you stand for what's right, as in you are the face of squirrel hawking, but falconry as a whole is the face of conservation? If we are working towards conservation, are we aiming to secure future populations for which this was legalized, as in keeping the birds to 70% that were doomed, as in destined to death, and bringing them back and teaching them to hunt for future generations? Or are we looking at this as a sport?
Did you write that question for him? That's a really good question.
He had ChatGPT on.
I was just going to say that's a really good question.
My phone's
That's a
been
really
dead
good
for the
question.
last hour.
Yeah, it is. That's
The falconry.
It's the Indian in me. Thank you, Gary.
I didn't mean anything.
I'm just messing.
And that was all in good.
Of course,
humor.
absolutely. I'll make butter chicken after this.
Because as falconers, we are a fraternity.
Absolutely.
Because we're all weird.
That's
But
right.
The world doesn't understand us, and we can't explain it.
No,
we
can't.
can't explain why we do this. But to your question, it was not my intent to be the face of squirrel hawking. I just solved my problem. And in doing so, it just so happened that I solved a lot of people's problem. And that is, they can't find rabbits, but they got plenty of squirrels. Yeah. And I never anticipated to become the face of squirrel hawking, but I'm very flattered to be considered that, because it's something that's very dear and close to my heart. However, it was not my goal. But it just comes with the territory. And so as far as sport, some people call it sport, some people call it an art, some people call it a science. I think it's a science and a practice. I don't really see the sport part of it. That's not how I view it.
Right. So if it's not a sport to you, it's a lifestyle. It's a hobby.
It has been my life, and whether they wanted it or not, it's been my family's life.
Absolutely. So now my question goes back to, what are your standings with conservation? As in, are you looking for 70% of the population of birds that are doomed to die? Are you looking to bring those into better standings and training them to hunt, to release for future purposes? Or is it 30% the Lamborghinis, like the goshawks, that you're wanting for sport purposes? What is your standing within that, and how do you think that will impact the future of falconry?
Well, when I say I'm looking for the 30%er, when that bird hits a trap, you don't have a clue what you got until you get it trained up and put it up in the woods. You don't know if it's a 30%er or a 70%er. But I'm hoping for, maybe that should be a better time. I'm looking at the conformation of the bird. How it's built, how it's put together, its weight, its size, its wingspan. I'm looking at all those characteristics of the animal to try to build in my mind that this bird is going to be ideal for this. I've seen birds that didn't meet all my criteria.
And do you release them?
When you take in a new bird and you train it and you get it out there and put it up in the woods, within 2 weeks, you pretty much know what you got. You can see the potential or non-potential.
Right.
Now, if there's still time left in the trapping season, if I don't see potential in those first 2 or 3 weeks, I'm going to release it, trap another, and start again. I know what to look for.
Right. So earlier, when you were mentioning dog training, you said something that was very beautiful to me. It was the artist sculpts the sculpture by chipping away at certain parts.
All the stuff that ain't supposed to be there.
Does that standing still stay the same with you with falconry birds?
Absolutely. You build a falconry bird. A falconry bird is built. But there's a lot more to it than just that. To accomplish that, to build a falconry bird, first of all, you got to start with the right raw material. right? And that's what I'm looking at when I'm trapping. I'm looking the bird over. I'm looking at her feet. I want big, meaty feet. I want sturdy legs.
So we know you like the meaty feet.
Yeah. But once I snare a bird that I think will be a good candidate, she's yet to be proven. So I don't know if I've got a 70%er or a 30%er at the trap. I have a kind of an idea, if she meets the conformation requirements that I'm looking for, then that's a good start. But what you don't know is what's up here in the head. Birds of prey, I see raptors as feet and head. And the ideal raptor, this is my assessment. Okay. This is not something that I've read in a book somewhere or whatever. My assessment of a good game hawk, whether it be a squirrel hawk or a pheasant or whatever, is that when you take a new bird, they're going to be more feet than head. Bonsai, and they eventually develop into a bird. Well, the ideal bird is 50% head and 50% feet. You want a bird that thinks and uses its feet and its head in concert to accomplish the task, which is killing something.
Do you believe you could mold a bird to think the way you want it to think?
Yeah.
Such as those who soar hawk over time rather than the first 2 weeks?
Yeah. Well, not in the first 2 weeks. Mm-hmm. But in the first 2 weeks, what I do observe is their tenacity and their persistence. I've had birds that would make one pass at a squirrel and then watch it run away. If I see that, I'm not impressed. But
we can't all live, Roger. I'm sorry.
But because that bird to me would be a 70%er.
The T level sound a little low on Roger right now.
That's a good question, but yeah, I think that, from my opinion, not, you didn't ask me the question, but we just tell the general public that, and then life's too short. Like, I don't need to save the world with one annoying bird that just doesn't.
Just cut it loose, right?
Doesn't care to live.
I don't develop an emotional attachment. You're either a rehabber or a falconer.
That's right.
And I don't develop an emotional attachment to these birds. I love these birds. I respect these birds. But for me, they're a tool.
Aaron names all his birds.
Not true.
Well, thank you for answering my question.
My pleasure.
All right.
Thank you, Roger.
Thank you,
My
Roger.
pleasure, brother.
So that was kind of a hard question. It was a good question.
Yeah, that was great.
Good question.
Good question. Yeah.
All right. Tyler Rankin had his hand up.
Oh, I did.
Yeah.
I just want to point out that he raised his hand like
Watch
Bobby
out.
like
Watch
Bobby
out.
Boucher. He went like this.
I know, like this. No, Raja, his question was pretty related to mine, and I think you've kind of already answered it. But I guess, my question was, do you think all red tails have equal potential for success? And I think you just basically said no. No, you don't.
I don't think they all.
You have a way to do it.
And that's illustrated by the mortality rate.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So they're not all equal.
Right.
I've had birds that I took and flew, and they didn't show the potential. Now, it's a known fact that in the second season, they often improve. But a little better than bad is not what I'm looking for. And I want a bird that shows me potential in the first season, and then they're going to get better in the second season, and they're going to become a legend in the long run. That's what I mean by a 30%er.
Right. So what advice, I guess, would you have for a falconer who has a bird who's not being as successful, as you'd like? I mean, the bird's out, it's hunting, it's trying, it's just not connecting, it's not being successful.
Well, if the trapping season is ended, you only got two choices: release it or finish out the season. But I wouldn't intermew a bird like that. I wouldn't tie myself down during the off season to a bird that I didn't have the confidence that this bird was not going to. I'm looking for a bird that's going to develop into a legend. That's what I'm looking for. I'm not looking for a bird that I'm going to have to nursemaid. I don't operate a convalescent home for raptors.
You've got to rehab.
You're right. Yeah. I'm a falconer, and the definition of falconry is taking quarry with a trained raptor. And if you're not doing that, it's attempted falconry.
Right.
It's not falconry.
Right.
And it's attempted falconry. Anybody can get a bird to fly to them, You know, when I'm a falconer, I want to take game with a raptor, and I want to take as much game as I can, not so I can brag about the head count, but because every engagement she has, she learns from it. She learns what works, and she learns what doesn't work.
Well, and you're building a team, and you want the best athlete for your team.
Exactly.
Right.
And if this bird shows me potential, what I'm looking for in a new bird is that I want to see an interest, an intense interest in squirrel, and I want to see persistence. I want to see a bird that doesn't give up, that makes multiple. Day before yesterday, it was yesterday. Yesterday, I watched a red-tailed chase a squirrel for 45 minutes, and she caught it. Ultimately, she caught it, but. You know, I'm not looking for a bird that would pursue that squirrel for a period of time and then get frustrated and move off. Go looking for another. I want a bird that's not going to leave that squirrel as long as she can see it.
Right.
You know, and just keep trying. And with all my experience, I've noticed red tails doing amazing things in their thought. For instance, I went to Pennsylvania, and this guy put his red tail up and got into a squirrel chase, and it chased it into a nest. The bird hit the top of the nest, and a squirrel popped out the bottom, and she stood up there and just watched it run out of sight. And the handler of that bird got all embarrassed and pissed and said, well, we'll just get this bird down and get a bird up there that'll hunt. You know, and he reached in his bag for the lure, and I grabbed his arm. I said, what are you doing? And he said, I'm going to get her down. We can get some bird up there that'll do the job. I said, this ain't over, man. He goes, what are you talking about? I said, that wasn't the one. Red tails will pick out a squirrel, and once they pick out a squirrel, it's that one. They'll fly past another easy opportunity, because in the wild, indecision can be fatal. And if you can't make up your mind what you're going to do, you know, you need to engage and stick with the engagement. You can't keep changing your mind. And that's the way the red tail's programmed to do. They're not contemplating the universe. They're not deciding to do that. That's who they are. That's how they're built mentally. They pick out something, and you know, and that's another thing that illustrated. When after a while, I hadn't said that very long, and I don't think half of the people that were there believed what I was saying, that I said, that's not the one. There's still a squirrel in that nest. The squirrel that's still in the nest is the one she chased into the nest. So right after I said that, the bird started scuffling around in the nest, and another squirrel popped out of it, and she nailed it.
It's crazy.
This is kind of interesting. And I was talking about this the other night with a guy. If you laid 4 fox squirrels out approximately the same size, if you laid them out on a table and allowed me to look at them, and then I turned my back and you shuffled them around, I couldn't tell you which one was one, number 2, number 3, number 4, but a red tail can. A red tail can distinguish one individual squirrel from another. That bird obviously knew that wasn't the one, and this was not going to be over until that was over. And another example of the red-tailed mentality, I was in Canada, and this guy we were hunting rabbits in a big industrial park, and out in the middle of this big field was this little, about 1.5 acre oasis, a dish out there where they'd been dumping stuff, you know, and there were trees growing out there. They hadn't manicured it. This bird got a squirrel chase going, and during that squirrel chase, I saw another squirrel flush, and I watched it and saw where it put in. So I had that in my mind. Well, the bird, after a really impressive chase, the bird caught the squirrel, went to the ground. Everybody was all excited. And then I asked this guy, I said, have you ever done a double? And I could see the color went out of his face, you know, because there are a lot of people that are one and done. They think it's unethical to go for a falconer to go out and take more than one head of game in a hunt. And I think that's ridiculous. Unless it's a honey hole close to your house that you're saving for those days when you don't have any time, but there ain't that many squirrels there, I could see that. But way I handle my business is if I got 2 hours to hunt, if she kills a squirrel in 5 minutes, she's going back up. If she kills another one in 5 minutes, she's going up. She's going to kill as many squirrels as she can kill in 2 hours we have allotted. Because, and it's not about head count for me. It's not about bragging rights. It's because they learn from every engagement what works and what doesn't work. And every engagement sharpens her ability to be a better hawk. And so I just feel like they should have all those opportunities that they can get. It's not about head count. Now, what a head count means to me, I had a guy back in Texas that came in, gangbusters, and he called me up one time and said, what's the most amount of squirrels that you ever caught in a single hunt? And I said, 5. I'll tell you that story in a minute. But I said, 5. And he goes, I'm going to beat that. And I said, I bet you will. I said, but one of these days with all this emphasis on head count, you're going to paint yourself into a corner to where you can't outdo the year before. And I was right, because a couple of years later, he's no longer a falconer. He's out because he maxed himself out and he couldn't top himself. He was all about ego.
I was going to guess if it was Jeff Fincher or not, but no, he's still doing it.
Wasn't Jeff.
He's still in it. Yeah.
It wasn't Jeff. But nice guy, and I liked him, and I was really impressed and proud of him for what he was doing. But he put way too much influence on the head count. It was a braggadocious thing. How that bird hoods and how that bird handles, that's to my credit. But how many squirrels that she took in the season is not to my credit.
That's God-given ability, you're saying?
I put her in the places where she could do that. But the number of squirrels that were caught that season is not to my credit, it's to hers. And so I want to build a bird that can do that. Now, there's always going to be a limit, but head count is not the gauge of my ability. That's the gauge of her ability. How she handles is to my credit.
Sure.
So did I answer the question or did I miss something?
You did. I think so. Yeah. No, that's good advice, I think, for a falconer who wants to make their bird better or be better.
Just be careful about the bragging, because sooner or later that's going to catch up with you.
Oh, yeah.
Be humble, but be persistent.
Heard that? Yeah, that's great. Yeah. I don't even know how much game I caught this year. First year I haven't counted anything.
I lost count.
I didn't even count this year. I'm just like, whatever. I'm just having
I do
fun.
have one more unrelated question. So back to, I guess, when you felt ostracized and were kind of, being ridiculed for doing the squirrel hawking. Did you get support maybe from other falconers you didn't know in other parts of the country who are also hawking squirrels to get, legitimized?
Not in the beginning. Now, I'm pretty sure that you guys that lived east of the Mississippi River, would not ostracize me because they had the same problem I had. The part of Texas that I live in, East Texas, is really more Louisiana than it is Texas. It's not cactuses and tumbleweeds. It's forests, swamps, rivers, lakes, ponds. It's wet, it's hilly, it's a lot of forests, it's pines on the high ground and hardwoods in the low ground. It looks just like I live on the front porch of the southeastern woodlands. And it's the same where I live all the way to the Atlantic Ocean, northern Florida, up the Carolinas. I live in a place very much like this, except I got a little more understory than what I've seen up here. But in the beginning, I didn't get any feedback from other people. I wasn't trying to solve everybody's problem. I was trying to solve my problem. And I wanted to be accepted in the falconry community, but that didn't have to be. I wanted it. I wanted to be accepted. But in the event that they never did accept me, I'd still be doing it. Because falconry is a personal thing. Or at least it was to me.
Absolutely.
It was a personal thing. I am my own biggest critic. I am my own biggest cheerleader. And my goal from day one in falconry was to be better. whatever that was. It was to be better. I wanted to be successful in falconry, and I found that falconry, being the practice of taking wild game with a trained raptor, the way you accomplish that is first find the game, the catchable game that you have the most of, and then select the right bird for the job. And so that's my philosophy and the way I attacked it. And I wanted to be able to fellowship with other falconers. I didn't want to be the black sheep. I didn't want to be the outlaw. I wanted to be accepted in the falconry community. I really, in the beginning, because I didn't know if anybody else was doing it. I was isolated. I was out in East Texas, and me and one other guy were the only ones in the whole part of the state.
Yeah.
And so I had never even been out of the state to falconry with other people. So I didn't know what was going on anywhere else. But I wanted to be recognized by my own club and accepted into the fold. And after that 5 years of exile, my former sponsor was the sitting president of the THA at that time. He called me up. He goes, "What are you doing, man?" I said, "Oh, just the usual." And he goes, "You still flying birds?" I said, "Oh, yeah." He says, "You still hunting squirrels?" I said, "Oh, yeah." He goes, "How's that going?" I said, "Whacking and stacking." Mm-hmm. And he says, "Well, I just kind of wondering why you ain't been around." See, when that president called me and said, "Who the F you think you are?" I thought, this is the president of the Texas Hawking Association. So he's probably not by himself to make this call to a member, a founding member, So my former sponsor said, "Well, just wondering why you ain't been around." I said, "Well, I didn't think you guys wanted me around." He goes, "What made you think that?" And I told him about the phone call. And he says, "Well, I just want you to know, he don't speak for all of us. We love you, man. We want you around. In fact, the reason I called you is I want you to be the keynote speaker this year at our banquet." So I went down there. My wife, that was one of the few meets she ever went with me, because she's not really into falconry. But she went down there with me, and I had all these things that I had improvised and designed and built, especially for what I was doing, which was foreign. I mean, to everybody else, because like I said, there were no vendors. You had to invent, design, and build all your own stuff. And mine, everything I did was built towards what I was doing. You're going to laugh when you hear this, but you know what tree climbing spurs are? Mm-hmm. I wore them every time I went out. Oh. Squirrel hawking. If a squirrel went into a hole, this is before I realized there's a lot more squirrels down the road. I would spike up that tree and dump a couple of smoke bombs down the hole. I eventually abandoned that progress. And these were real tree spikes, not the pole spikes like this. These were tree spikes like this. So you had to learn how to walk and run without tripping up yourself.
Stabbing yourself.
Well, I had all that stuff laid out on the table and going to do a serious talk. And when I started into it, everybody started laughing. And they were laughing so hard, some of them had tears running down their cheek. And I thought to myself, this is after 5 years of exile. I thought to myself, is that what's going on here? Did they get me down here to humiliate me? And I didn't know really what to make of it. And then I looked at the back of the room. My wife was back there laughing. She was laughing so hard. She had tears running. She's laughing at them laughing. And then I realized there was only about 25 or 30 people in the room. And then I realized this was so bizarre and so foreign to what these guys were accustomed to, that and then I'm kind of an animated guy, and they just found it to be humorous. A few years later, Texas sponsored our first NAFA meet in Amarillo. On one Sunday afternoon, I was leaving the parking lot in Abilene, headed to home, and the vice president, a long winger, the vice president of the THA, chased me down in the parking lot and said, we're having our first NAFA meet in November in Amarillo. I said, yes, sir. He says, I was just wondering, would you give that same speech in Amarillo? And I said, yeah, well, I thought NAFA was on board. I mean, it's an NAFA meet.
Right.
Now, I wasn't the banquet night speaker. I was on the off night, but the room was packed when I gave this speech. I had 2 big old slide rolls, Of course, I still have them, but you can't find a slide projector. But anyway, I gave this speech, and all these guys out there in overalls and rubber boots, from the East, were just jaw dropped listening to what I had to say because, I didn't just solve my problem. I solved their problem. And everybody made the wrong assumption that NAFA was on board. Mm. And because I was speaking at a NAFA meet. Right. What I didn't know is NAFA had no clue. The THA, they were the ones that
stuck you in there.
Yeah, I was theirs.
Right.
I was a member of the fold, and they stuck me out there. Well, there was a few guys after the speech was done that came up to me outside in the foyer and shook my hand and said, "Man, thanks for having the balls." Yeah. And but NAFA was not on board, and not that they didn't carry me to the edge of town and stone me over it, which I thought could be a possibility, knowing what I knew going into it. But that's what began the whole trend to, condone it, and it took me, that was in 1995, 2003 was when Daryl made his decision.
Got your game pin for you.
Yeah. So did I answer your question?
You did, yeah. No, that's great.
Okay.
To see, actually, you gave a speech, and then to see the community of people who came and listened to you, and actually got your advice because they're doing the same thing you're doing to come to an NAFA meet and see that. That's really cool.
Yeah, they thought there was some kind of approval involved, but there wasn't.
No, but they saw you, legitimizing it. No, that's really cool. Thank you.
Thank you. And so that was before Daryl made it legit.
Oh, well before.
Yeah.
That was
okay. So
8 years.
It was still like
8 years before.
It was still like a little touchy, and then you gave the speech, and then they didn't.
Well, it was touchy outside of Texas, because my group had accepted me.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what was going on in the rest of the world, because all I knew was what was going on in my world, and the only other falconers I knew were the ones that were in my world.
Right.
Well, they had all brought me back into the fold. Not everybody, not 100% of them.
Right.
But most of them. The ones in my mind that mattered.
That's it, yeah. Exactly.
So, and then I had no idea. Listen, I spent $20,000 of my family money to publish that book, not knowing if anybody was going to buy one. And I'm thankful for my wife.
I was just going to say.
I went to the bank to try to get a loan. I've been banking at that bank. It's the only bank I've ever banked at. It's a small town bank. Same bank my daddy used, and he could walk in there in his day. He could say, "I need $10,000." They'd go sign here. And I thought I could, because I'd borrowed and paid back at least $1 million on time. I thought I could walk in there and say, "I need $20,000."
You should have wore your glasses and your 3-piece suit and your cowboy hat.
Yeah.
But no, they would give me the $20,000 if I put up everything I owned as collateral. I wasn't going to do that. I wasn't going to do that for my selfish gain. That was my family's money, my wife, my children. And so I just decided I was going to break it up into articles and give it away. It made me sick. It made me literally ill. I went home and I was in the bed when my wife came home from work, and she goes, "You've been to the bank, hadn't you?" She told me, "You're going to go get the money. I'm not going to do it. You're going to go get it." Well, she knew something didn't go right. She goes, "You've been to the bank, hadn't you?" I said, "Yeah." She goes, "What'd they say?" I said, "They wanted everything we have on collateral." She goes, "What are you going to do?" I said, I'm going to trash the whole thing. I'm going to break it up into articles and give it away. She goes, no, you're not. Now she's not a falconer, not interested in it. It's kind of been a thorn in her ass, for all these years. But she, what we did? We charged it all on credit cards. It took me a long time to pay it off. I didn't make a dime on that book. I just want everybody to know that, because we were paying interest on it the whole time. It took me about 10 years to sell all those books, or most of them. But
are you aware of how much your book costs now?
Yeah, people are paying $350 to $450. That's the average. If they can find it.
That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I bet you if you did another run of them, you'd make all that money because people are just scouring trying to find it.
Let me tell you my logic on that. At the time I wrote that book, there were 3,000 falconers in America. I printed 2,000 books. The falconry community was not real cool about squirrel hawking. So how many of those 3,000 people would buy this book that I spent $20,000 publishing? And so after that first run sold for the most part, I thought, man, that's good. I was scared to go for another run because the second run would wipe me out. Yeah. So I didn't. I hate it that people are having to pay $350 to $450 for a copy of that. I hate that. That's not me.
I think it's awesome.
But
it shows how valuable and awesome your book is.
There was one sold in Great Britain for $3,000 American. There was one sold in Canada for $1,500. That's what I've been told by the president of the New York Club. Not the current president, but a previous president. And, that breaks my heart. I sold it for $30. They're paying 10 times to get a copy of it. And in one sense, that it flatters me that people would be willing to pay that kind of money to get that book. That's kind of confirmation of me and my effort. But I wasn't willing to go out there on a limb again because there wasn't enough falconers in America to do it. So, for everybody's information, I've still got one more book, and it's not going to be 100 and something pages. It'll be a big book. It's called Squirrel Hawking. And it's going to be updated it'll have everything the first book had in it, and then a lot more. So, and people will not have to pay $350, $450 for it. I even gave a guy permission to do an ebook.
You should do an audiobook.
Well, I've had an offer to do that. Jonathan wanted to do.
No, but honestly, you should, because that's people. Podcasting is huge now. Audiobooks are huge. There's whole Meat Eater.
Audiobooks don't have any pictures.
No, but it doesn't matter because people have busy lives. They're commuting back and forth to work.
You can listen to it in your car.
There's Meat Eater, the biggest hunting biz company in the world, basically. Yeah. They come out with new books, 1 or 2 a year, and they don't even. It's just all audio.
Well, I don't have a problem. Of course, Jonathan wanted me to read the book.
Oh, it'd be so cool if you did it.
Yeah, well, it would be, but that'd take a lot of time.
It takes a tremendous amount of time, but
he thought we could do it in a weekend. He thought we could do it in a weekend, and I don't think we could do it in a weekend.
I would implore you to do it.
Yeah,
it would be incredible. It would be so incredible.
For me, it's not about the money. It's not about the money. Money has nothing to do with it. It's a labor of love, not money. So if somebody wants to do an audiobook or an ebook, I really don't have a problem with it. Yep. Because it's the information. I did that for falconry. I didn't do that to further my own self. Yeah. I'm very flattered when people call me an expert and a guru, and it's almost embarrassing. You know what I'm saying?
But it's true.
Because I don't see myself that way. I just see a guy.
That's why you are that guy.
Well,
Gary, we could get Stone Cold Steve Austin to narrate it for you.
That'd be awesome. That would be awesome. But, Jonathan wants me to read it, and I would be willing to do it when I have the time to do it. But it's not going to be done in a weekend.
No, I can imagine.
Because here recently, with the publisher that I'm using right now for the new book, Red Tail, the Guide to the Workhorse.
It's good.
The first book, it was laid out in a weekend and went to the printer, and a couple of months later, it was in my garage.
We can't wait for the new book.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's, my style is conversational. A lot of falconry books, especially the classic ones, and a lot of the newer ones, they'll tell you things about, getting a hawk sharp set, but they don't tell you what that really means or how to achieve it. This book that's coming out is a detailed weight and weight management, free lofting, the new manning method, raptor behavior, dogs and dog training, all of those things in detail. Like the average length of a chapter is 50 pages, 8.5 by 11. Okay, so it is a in-depth book that any red tailer would want to own and refer to as a reference book. So, did I answer your question?
Actually, no. He hasn't even got there yet.
Okay, go ahead.
This is Gary. This is one of my apprentices, Mike.
We met Gary Friday, and it was awesome. We had some really good conversations, got to hunt with him, and I had no idea because I was only introduced to him as this is Gary. So I knew who the speaker was, but I didn't put it together on Friday. And then Saturday he got up there and I was like, oh, all right, cool. So I'll make it quick. My question, all right, so I'm an older guy and I am a first year apprentice, but I've been around for like 6 years. So I'm not a complete layman, as a first year apprentice. But my question, so falconry, 4,000 years old, recognized by the U.S. government since like the early 70s. You were a maverick. You solved a lot of people's problems because of your crazy, insane. You're just trying to do your own thing, but it was a crazy idea to everybody else. So my question to you is, as a first year apprentice, and with a sport and a culture that we have been doing for so long, thousands of years, do you feel like everything's been done, or do you feel as an elder statesman that do you encourage people to, as long as the safety of the bird is being held in regard, do you think that people should take chances and try some new stuff?
Sure. That's how falconry has survived as long as it has and become so complex. Falconry came to America from the UK. Mm-hmm. All right. The UK, they're kind of jealous of us because we have a lot of benefits that they don't have. I tell people, the Chinese came up with gunpowder and we got to wondering what would happen if you split an atom. Yeah. We take things and we take them to the limit. And a
lot of people in this room would probably like to buy an eagle, though, to be honest with you.
Huh?
A lot of people in this room would probably like to buy an eagle if they could.
That's all they got on us.
That's all they got on us, but it's kind of a big thing for some people.
Yeah.
No, I'm kidding.
Falconry is dynamic. And it's always evolving. People are doing things, and a lot of people that are accomplishing great things are people just like you who just have a few years and not got the memo that this can't be done or this shouldn't be done or that won't work. I can't tell
Gary, hang on. This is my apprentice. I need you to stop.
You would be shocked to know how much of my technique was stolen from people like you who didn't get the memo that something couldn't be done or wouldn't work.
Well, from our conversation on Friday, I just want to let you know I am stealing your hooding technique that you gave me.
Absolutely. Great.
I love it.
Well, that's what it is. When somebody comes up to me and I see them doing something, unique and special, I'll tell them I'm going to steal this and I'm going to make it mine. But I will give you the credit.
That's very hip hop of you because hip hop uses a lot of sampling.
Yeah. But anyway, the answer to your question is who knows what the next big thing is going to be? You know, the next big discovery, the next big accomplishment in falconry is going to be. Because were it not for the fact that it's dynamic, it would have burned out a long time ago. And, I believe falconry, by the way, is much older than 4,000 years old. My idea of the origins of falconry is back when there were no grocery stores and your life depended, you and your family's life depended on what you could go out there and procure. That if you got out there and wasn't having a great day and you saw a big bird of prey go down and catch a big rabbit or something, you go spook it off of it and steal the rabbit. That was the first falconry, was robbing them.
Yes.
And then somebody got to thinking one day, what if I could harness that power? Because like you got a bow and arrow, you got to be skilled. It really takes a lot of practice. You got to have a good bow and a good arrow that go straight, and then you got to practice with it. But that bird of prey, it's a smart bomb. It goes and it catches it. And, what if you could harness that? And I don't know how it happened after that, whether they took a young bird or whether, how they come about it. But somebody came up with the idea of harnessing that power that was obviously that sometimes saved their life. And, because I can see in my childish imagination, I can see a guy going down there and stealing that rabbit and maybe gutting it and leaving the guts for the bird to come back to, or throwing the head and not making soup out of it, stealing the bulk of it but leaving something. This method that I use, this whisper method that I spoke about Saturday night. I firmly believe that if you knew where there was a bird of prey hanging out, like their territory, that if you went out there and you put some food on a fence post and then backed away and let them, that they would, if they came to it and if they ever did come to it and take it and eat it, and then if you did that again and moved away, they would come take it and eat it. And with a bird of prey, once that fear level has reduced to a point, then their impatience level goes up. And so they don't want to wait. And so you could be closer and closer into, I take a wild bird off of the trap and put it into the chamber, and a few days later it's hopping to me.
Well, it's like you were saying, eventually
it's the same thing.
Eventually they'll come to you.
Eventually they'll come get it.
Yeah.
Because they're not patient.
Yeah.
If they're not afraid, if they don't have any inhibitions, they'll come take it. So, and I believe that might be the way that it originally occurred.
I appreciate that, because there are a lot of guys that are at your stature that try to gatekeep and prevent people from coming up with new ideas, whether it be through their apprenticeships or what have you. I'm blessed to have a good sponsor that kind of lets me.
There are some know-it-alls out there that are actually inhibiting progress.
Yeah, for sure.
I say let people experiment.
I'm also the president of the podcast fan club, so I appreciate you doing this, and thanks for answering the question.
It's my pleasure.
You're the man. Thank you,
sir.
Thanks for coming too.
No problem.
All right. Do we have any other burning questions here?
Maybe.
You got one?
Do we have time?
Yeah, of course.
At midnight?
Yeah, why not?
40 chance after dark.
Well,
All right. Would you like to introduce yourself?
yeah, I can. I'm Justine. I'm from South Carolina. Gary and I actually had the pleasure of hunting together yesterday, so that was a great time, and drove him to the spot. So I had hours with him, which was awesome.
Very enjoyable.
But yeah. Hopefully, I was a good driver. But one of the questions that I had for somebody who's I haven't been doing this long. It's only my 5th year, but feels like, I watch what other people across the United States experience, and you see maybe people struggling with game numbers, particularly maybe jackrabbits. And it feels like on the East Coast that I'm in what feels like a stronghold of game numbers, that I can go outside and I know I'm going to get a slip. I have no doubt of that. Do you think there's a risk of losing it, or do you have concern?
Of losing what?
squirrels? Or, do you think squirrel hawking is a stronghold of falconry in the United States that we won't lose?
Certainly east of the Mississippi, it ain't going away. No matter what the rest of the country does, squirrel hawking is not going away, because we in the east, and I'm not east of the Mississippi. When I say east of the Mississippi, let's go a couple of 100 miles to the west of the Mississippi. Basically, half of the continental United States is heavy into squirrel hawking right now. That's not going to change, because, success is a whole lot better than failure. And if a person like you or like me who really doesn't have any choice other than to be a falconer, because we can't be happy without it, we can't be fulfilled without it, we're going to continue on, and I'm going to be successful no matter whose opinion is counter to what I'm doing. And that's how I'm here right now. As I went against the grain and was determined to do what I knew I had to do to be successful, regardless of what anybody else is thinking. Now, in regards to the availability of game, of course, there's no risk in squirrels, but I'll just kind of put it like this. If all I had was kestrels and rattlesnakes, I'd be hunting rattlesnakes with kestrels. I'd figure out a way.
That's right.
To get that done. And I wouldn't call anybody and ask permission for that. Because my goal from day one was to practice falconry and to be the best that I could be. And, I found that my path, the path of least resistance, would go with figure out what available game you have the most of, catchable, and then choose the right bird for that job. And that's worked for me for all these years. And fortunately for me, a good number of people in falconry community understood my plight and my solution. And, my sponsor and another prominent falconer, he's not in Texas anymore. He's last I heard, he was in Oregon. But they came out to East Texas to my place for a weekend, spent 2 days showing me how to find rabbits, and they didn't even find a turd. So at the end of the second day, they acknowledged, that I had a problem, and when I caught that first squirrel, in spite of all I did to try to stop it, when I caught that first squirrel and realized where I had to go, I called my former sponsor. I wanted his approval, but I didn't have to have it. I wanted it. And I called him up, and he was one of the 2 guys that came down to try to show me I didn't know how to find rabbits and couldn't find a turd. And when I told him, he said, "Well, Gary, I think you ought to hunt what you can get, what you can find." I got his approval. That was all I needed, and from there, and I'm extremely grateful to him for understanding. He is a true falconer. Don Raber is his name. And I just got lucky. There were only 24 falconers listed in the state of Texas when I got in, and 12 of those, at least what they told me, was they weren't practicing at the time. An apprentice goes looking for a sponsor. He sees all those names and phone numbers in there. He doesn't have any idea, he or she, doesn't have any idea if the person on the other end of that phone is any good or not. You got to be a general or a master to sponsor somebody. So they just assume if he's got a general class or a master class falconry permit that he must be good at this. But you don't know. He may be a bum. I got lucky with my sponsor. He was a very accomplished falconer, still is. And I credit him with inspiring me to go forward with all this. And in regards to your question about, you say, do you think that it will ever go away, or what? How did you word that?
Just more of it doesn't feel like there's any problems with gray squirrels, right? I don't hear. You might get some years that the populations are lower, and you can look at mast and weather, whatever, but it doesn't feel like there's anything hard hitting that's getting rid of gray squirrels. That's getting rid of my ability to go out.
Game numbers, squirrels, they're rodents. God's little lunch sacks, they come in different sizes for different size predators, and they breed prolifically. They are what fuels everything. So, as far as I hunted the same spots, I have 3 primary spots that I've hunted for the last 47 years, and like I say, I've never held myself back as far as how many she could kill in a single hunt. And up until there's been about 3 or 4 years ago, we had a freak ice storm in February, which was in late February, which is the time when squirrels are having babies and nests, leaf nests. And we lost a whole generation of squirrels. Up till that year, I could say I've never seen a year where there didn't seem to be as many squirrels as there was the year before. The way it is with squirrels, they multiply so prolifically that when you remove a squirrel, you just made an opportunity for another squirrel to move in and establish its territory. And so I don't think that squirrels is going to be a risk. That freak storm, of course, 2 years later, it's back. It's back. They're back. Things happen. Rabbits go in cycles, 10-year cycles, kind of related to the coyote population. When you start finding coyote scat everywhere, you're going to notice the rabbit population has gone down. And then somehow or other it rebounds. And it goes in those cycles. So, the biggest problem that we have is urbanization and habitat destruction. None of that has anything to do with falconry. Squirrels are both forest and urban. I mean, when I got the squirrel seasons changed in Texas, I lobbied for that for 2 years. One of the things that I said to them is if we killed every squirrel outside the city limits within 3 years, the squirrels that were breeding in the city limits would be moving out into the vacuum. So I told them there would be, I was only asking for an extended season because we had a split season on squirrels, and there were 2 weeks and 2 weeks, and one in October and then one in January. And so if you were going to hunt squirrels all through the falconry season, I did what I call guerrilla hawking. I would park my truck out off the road, out of sight, or I would park it on the opposite side of the road where I was going to be hunting and put my hood up so people would think that truck was stalled. And then before I would come out of the woods, I'd drop the squirrel on the ground and go out and make sure there wasn't nobody sitting behind my truck. And then I'd run back and get it. And I told the board of directors of the Texas Parks and Wildlife, I told them I was doing that. And then I told them I was only asking for an extension out to the middle of March. I told them that from January 15th to March, if there'd be more squirrels killed crossing the road in a small town in Texas than all of the squirrel hawkers in East Texas would kill in that particular point of time. Fortunately, in Texas, there's still common sense. And I pled that case. They all chuckled, but they knew it was true. Well, finally, I had a little help, and I can't tell you what his name was because he worked in the bureaucracy. He's a guy that we invited to our state meet from the bureaucracy, and we hooked him up with some of our best falconers, and he wound up getting assigned to me for that day. And I took him out for a great day of hawking at a state meet. And he was the head biologist of the state. The Congress and the Senate, they don't make the laws concerning wildlife. The biologists do. They act on their recommendations. I had him in my corner. And so he told me, I can't give you his name because he told me if you tell anybody, I'll deny it. But he said, you need to go to these forums. You had 9 minutes. You had 3 minutes. Everybody had 3 minutes to keep the tree huggers from filibustering. When is it all going to stop? But so they behind the board of directors of the Parks and Wildlife, there's a traffic light on the wall, red, green, yellow. The microphone, when the green light came on, the microphone was hot. When the yellow light came on, you got 1 more minute. When the red light came on, the microphone was cut. I had a speech that was 9 minutes long. So I had to get 2 of my buddies, the squirrel hawkers, I had to get 2 of them to memorize a third of the speech, and we signed up in order. So they got the whole thing. The guy that was in my corner met me in the foyer afterwards. He said, good job. He said, this might take a while, but we'll get it done. I said, okay. So then it was just only 2 or 3 months later, I got a call at night, and it was this guy. He says, are you sitting down? Because they had voted on it. He said, are you sitting down? I said, I was expecting bad news. I said, do I need to? And he goes, probably. And I sat down. I said, oh, what's up? And he says, you know what we got? I said, what? And he said, no closed season, no bag limit for falconry take on squirrels. Because, in my speech, I told them, we put these birds up during the off season, so they're only out there 6 months out of the year. And during that 6 months that they're not actively hunting, they're eating all that they caught during the other 6 months. Nothing is wasted. Not even a claw or a tooth is wasted. They eat 100% of everything. It's efficient. And we don't have any impact on the wild populations. Every time you take a head of game out, you just provided a home for another one. So they get it if they got any common sense. And they just felt like instead of limiting it to March, it's self-regulating. If they put the birds up in March until the following September or October, that's self-regulating. Why would we regulate it and potentially have to enforce it when it takes care of itself? And that made all the sense in the world to them. And I got more than what I wanted. I also got another law passed because in Texas, I'm sure it was the same way in other states. BC trapping. If you look at the definition of hunting, one of the definitions, it's like A, B, C, D, E, they define what hunting is. And the last one was trapping or attempted trapping. Now, when they made that law, they had no thoughts about falconry. That was the farthest thing for their mind, not even a consideration. They were talking about guns and archery and trapping like steel jaw trapping and stuff. And you couldn't use a motor vehicle or a public roadway to accomplish any of those things. So technically, we were illegal. And it was up to the game warden that pulled you over as to whether he wanted to enforce that. For years, I'd been pulled over a number of times, and when they saw all the permits, of course, most of them didn't know anything about falconry laws. And they saw them state seals, and they just assumed that if he's got this permit that he can do this. And I got let go. But then at a state meet one year, we had a little meeting at the end of it, and we talked about there was a guy that got busted trapping Harris hawks down in South Texas. And he just went and paid the fine. The fine is $25 to $280, I think, is what the fine was, depending on the judge. And so this is something in Texas is one of the main ways we get our birds, is by BC trapping, road trapping. And so the sitting president at that time, which was my former sponsor, he's probably been president more than anybody, he said, we need a test case. We need to find out, is this legal or is this not legal? So if anybody gets busted for falconry, don't just call the club president and let him know. And then we have a falconry advisory board in our club that deals with this kind of stuff, and let them know and put the wheels in motion. So this kid from Livingston, Texas, I turned him away as a falconer, as an apprentice when he was 14 years old. I don't sponsor kids, especially if they ain't got a driver's license or a car. Their parents will tell you that they'll say, well, we'll do this, we'll do that, we'll do this. But you're an exception. You are a rare animal, because the parents will tell you anything you want to hear to get their kid to have what they want. And then it gets to be a problem. Kids wanting to go hawking every day, and you got to drive them and wait for them. So that's just not a good idea. And unless it's your own kid, But anyway, so he got somebody else. I told him, you go find somebody that'll sponsor, and I'll help you, but I'm not signing the papers. I'm not going to be responsible for you. Well, he got it. He turned 16, got him a car and a driver's license, and borrowed his grandma's car. It was his grandma's car. Called me up and wanted to know if I'd go, if I'd guide him around trapping. I said, sure, come on up. So he came up, and we went out, and I was going to do my route, trapping route. And we went through a town where another falconry buddy of mine lived. And I called him up, and I said, we're trapping. You want to ride along? So the only one in the car that was really actually trapping was the kid driving. I'm in the back seat. I'm just guiding. So we throw a trap out, and we're sitting there watching it with the binoculars. The bird's sitting off in a snag on one side, and the trap's on the side of the road. And beyond my view in the binoculars, I saw a game warden truck pull up to the stop sign. And then he turned, and he came down slowly past us, and then he turned around and came up behind us. I was the only one that noticed it. And he pulled up behind us, and he got out, and he was sneaking up on the back of the car. He had his hand on his pistol. Because three guys in a car sitting on the side of the road with binoculars watching something, So I told everybody, I said, everybody be cool. There's a game warden sneaking up on the back of our car with his hand on his pistol. I said, let me do all the talking. So he came up to the window and asked us what we were doing, and we explained it to him, and he didn't have a clue what we were talking about until we drove him up there and show it. He said, follow me down to it. This was on a weekend, so there was nobody at the office for him to call. He was a fairly new game warden. Took us down to a Dairy Queen, said, y'all wait here. I got to go back to the office and do some research. We sat there for about 2 hours. He came back eventually, and he said, I've got good news and I've got bad news. Which one do you want first? I said, what's the bad news? He says, I'm going to have to issue a citation. I said, and what's the good news? He says, I'm only going to issue one. Y'all decide who gets it. Well, of the three men there, the one had the best relationship with the bureaucracy was me. So I stepped up. I said, give it to me. My wife thought I was an idiot. So I got cited. Well, the club told me, I got a call from another person in the bureaucracy secretly on the side and said, when you go to court, plead innocent. If you're found guilty, appeal it. So the first time I went to trial, it was me representing myself, and the game warden was representing the state. There were no lawyers involved except for the ambulance chaser that was acting as the judge. The real judge was in Wyoming trout fishing. This guy was filling in for him. Obviously had a little bone to pick with law enforcement, So he heard my story. They heard the game warden. So I pled my story. I pled my case innocent on precedent. I told them I'd been pulled over many, many times over the years, and once I showed my permits, they let me go. I said, in fact, I had my book with me. And I opened it up to the chapter where it had pictures of the trap and trapping in the car and all that stuff. I said, this book is in the Texas Parks and Wildlife Library in Austin. Nobody's ever come to me and tried to arrest me for it. So then the game warden got up and he read the law clearly. I was guilty, clearly. So we sat out in the hall. He went in to deliberate. A few minutes later, he come out there and he called us in and he ruled I was guilty. And he waged a $5 fine. And the game warden stood up and objected, and he said, well, on what grounds are you objecting? He said, well, the minimum fine is $25. And he said, okay, $25. Obviously, he thought this was ridiculous, you know. So, but I was guilty. And then I stood up and said, I would like to appeal it. And he said, well, it's going to cost you $280 to appeal this $25 fine. I said, I'd still like to do it. So go fill out the paperwork, pay your money. So I did. I had another trial date was set. This one was going to be in front of a 3-judge panel. And so I reported this to the Falconry Advisory Board, you know, that I was guilty. I appealed it, whatever. And so the guy that was trying to help me from the bureaucracy said, well, okay, we'll get to work on this end and see what we can do. The day before my trial, I got a fax from Austin. He called me up and he said, tomorrow morning there's a memo going out to every game warden's office in the country. I mean, in the state, that you guys can use your cars to do this. You know, you can do what you're doing as long as you do it in a safe manner. You know, and it will be printed on the face of your permit. Now it's on the front. We are allowed to use our vehicles on public roadways on the Texas permit, and so. He said, you take this memo, this fax. He sent me the same fax that was going to all the game wardens. He said, you take this to court and present it to them and they'll drop the charges. I lost the money, but I felt like it was money well spent, you know, because now in Texas we can do it and feel comfortable with it. You know, we're legal. There's no fear of getting busted trapping. So, that's why I think it's very, very important, like Bob was saying last night at the banquet, that it's important to have a state club that's strong. Georgia, they got 2 clubs, you know, and you can't be a force if you're split. United we stand, divided we fall. A great man said that, you know, and it's true. So, you know, people split clubs and do all for the silliest, most childish reasons. You know, people start thinking they're better than somebody else and we'll form our own club. You know, they miss the whole point of what the purpose of a club is. Yeah, they're going to try to entertain us and provide things for us and keep us together, but their purpose really of a strong state club is to stand between you and being legislated out of existence. And there's safety in numbers. We are a necessary, well, we're not even a necessary evil. We're a negative cash flow for the game department. They spend more labor and money just making you a permit. You know, people go to work. Secretaries, you know, stationery, printers, you know, all this stuff goes to work. Their cash cow is white-tailed deer, turkeys, largemouth bass, quail, pheasant. You know, that's their cash cow. That's where they make their money. We are something that if a lot of them had their way, they just make it illegal. Be a lot cheaper. Make it illegal. Less paperwork. You know, so every state needs one strong club, and you're the future, so you're going to carry that ball
specifically.
I felt the torch.
It's on your shoulders.
So squirrels are good, Justine.
Yeah. They're in good hands.
But as far as the squirrel population, I wouldn't be worried about it.
All right. Thank you, Justine.
Thank you, Gary.
And thank you for chauffeuring me around yesterday and listening to me. This girl had to listen to me for a long time yesterday.
All ears.
All right, guys. We're at 1 a.m. So Gary's got a flight in the morning. What do you say we call it?
You can call this good.
We'll call it good, right? All right.
Well, thank you for your attention.
Of course. Thank you.
And thank you for the opportunity. And I might say this one last comment. I'm getting, on up there. I don't know how many more years I got left in me as far as life. falconry is very important to me, and my concern in the last couple of years since I had the quadruple bypass is the future of falconry. And I've met some goofballs in falconry, some people that I would just as soon would find another hobby, but my concern is the future of falconry. And at this meet, I've been very encouraged that there's a lot of people that'll carry this torch and that will guard falconry. There's always that kook that's going to go out there and do something stupid and wind up killing somebody's cat, and those guys they're amongst us, and so we need to be guarded against that. We need to police our own ranks, because otherwise we won't be able to do this thing we're so passionate about. Nobody's going to understand this. They don't understand it. Your wife doesn't understand it. The people that ask you, what do you get out of it? You can't explain it. So we're kind of at a disadvantage in that respect. We can't make them relate. Because, have somebody ever asked you, well, what is falconry? And you go into this long spiel and you start see them yawning through their teeth and their eyes tell you they've lost you a long time ago. You just went right over their head. That club, that state club, that's what's going to stand between you and annihilation. So support your local club, your state club. That's it. That's all I got to say.
Well said. That was great.
Well said. All right, let's hear it for Gary.
Yeah, Gary.